Hello, everybody. I'm just going to give you a 1-minute warning. We're going to start in a minute. Thank you. There's a row along the back here if people need a seat. Over here. What's that?
Can't hear you.
It's hard. That's the first time anybody's told me that.
Thank you.
Are you coming here? Is this you?
So these are the ones I know, that I've talked to.
Okay, thank you. Okay, you're There is a... Okay, just going to start. You ready? Steady. Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear? Because apparently it's hard to hear. Maybe we can get our microphones turned up, especially ours and Deputy. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to the second meeting of the Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Gordon Perks and Councillor Brad Bradford, who are members of this subcommittee, and also to Councillor Anna Bailau's staff who are here today. And for those in the room who with us, there is a screen at the back. You can see there's real-time updates there. There's also a TV and some chairs in the rotunda if you're getting tired of standing and you can't find a seat. But any seats available along the two back wings are yours. And of course, you can always follow the agenda and debate on your computer, your tablet, or your smartphone, www.toronto.ca/council, because this is, I believe, being streamed. So today we acknowledge the land we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And I'd like to ask a committee, are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? You don't own any of these buildings we're going to be discussing tonight. Okay, very good. Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of July 16th? Councillor Perks, thank you very much. We have a, pardon?
All those in favor.
All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? None. That's carried. We have quite a few deputants here tonight. First of all, I just want to welcome every one of you here tonight. We did set this meeting for an evening to have maximum attendance because many people cannot attend during the day. And this is a tremendous turnout for this meeting on the protection of affordable rental housing, which is set up under the Planning and Housing Committee. It's a subcommittee of our Planning and Housing Committee. It reports through Planning and Housing, and those go to Council after that. We have a whole number of letters that people have sent. We also have a number of speakers. Friends, we have 42 speakers times 5. That is 200 minutes. Put that into hours. That's 3.5, 4 hours with questions. I just want to ask everybody, because we have an option to take the time down to 3 minutes and then have more time for discussion, or carry on at 5 minutes and everybody gets their 5 minutes. It does mean that we'll be here till about 11 o'clock. So I think I just wanted, yeah, somebody just went, oh my God. But those are the rules. We're set up at 5 minutes. I'm just going to ask kind of the room if you'd like to go to 3. I know you're sometimes prepared for that, which will give us a chance to ask you more questions and have a longer discussion with staff. Or if you're in for deputations till 11, and then we'll have our staff conversation. Would you like to talk amongst yourself and decide? we're with you. Okay, this is Gord wants to do hands up. Hands up for 3 minutes. So, well, I think the 3s might have it. Hands up for 5. Okay, the 3s have it. Thank you very much. We will be paying very close attention to everything everybody says. We are the victims of so many people wanting to speak on that, and today we coined a new phrase, Reno victims. Many people here tonight are Reno victims. Yes. Okay. So there is a speakers list which you can see, and I'm going to move that speakers who have not pre-registered be allowed to register to speak until 8 o'clock on November 20th, 2019, after which no further registration is allowed and we'll close the speakers list. That the length of public presentations be limited to 3 minutes.
Maybe that's all. I don't know if you want any of the other stuff.
No, just that, 3 minutes, and that we have the ability to ask you questions for 3 minutes. And there is that motion. Oops, little technical.
I'm not voting for that.
Okay, I'm just going to read it again. Oh, I've got it here. The speakers who have not pre-registered be allowed to register to speak until 8 p.m. on November 20th, 2019, after which no further registration is allowed and the speakers list will be closed, and that the length of public presentations be limited to 3 minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So I'm also going to suggest, if you're here from your building and you've registered to speak, if you'd like to come up together, that might be effective as well, because you're telling us the same story from where you're living or your experience. So starting with the speakers list today, I'm going to call Tanya Neumeier, and after Tanya, it's Barbara Erochina. Oh, right here, sorry. Come up to the front, and hi. And you'll see there are microphones and little.
That's on now, right?
Can you hear? Great. Okay. Hello, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak. My name is Barbara Erochina, and this is my wife, Tanya Neumeier, and we are residents of Toronto living in Ward 11. We are here to speak about the personal impact that both the N12 and the N13 applications have had on our access to affordable long-term housing here in Toronto. We are currently preparing to go to a hearing to oppose what we believe to be a frivolous N13 that has been made on us. We moved into our current home 3 years ago as a result of being served an N12 at our previous home. Last time, the process of attending a hearing at the LTB, facing down a possible eviction, and dealing with a landlord that yelled at us and lived below us was disruptive to the point that we decided to move rather than fighting to stay. As we moved across the street, we watched the house be staged, sold, and bought by new owners. The designated family member that was due to move in never lived on the premises, but instead arranged for the sale. Because our landlord was an elderly woman and we wanted to leave the situation behind us, we chose not to file with the landlord and tenants board to address the misconduct. However, this time, we are making a very different choice. We are choosing to stand up for our rights as tenants by opposing our current N13 at the LTB, as well as by sharing our story here as part of the larger issue. We've spent months doing our research with many resources. And we wrote our landlords a letter requesting to stay and being clear about the fact that their request was frivolous. We cited the sources we spoke with, addressed our rights, informed them about the Toronto Housing Plan for 2020 to 2030, and directed them to the recent research from McGill about how short-term rentals are escalating the housing crisis because they stated in their N13 that they would like to renovate our unit to non-commercial purposes, to non-residential purposes, and change it to short-term rentals. They have given us multiple N13s and are now actually taking us to the board, which we will have to show up for. We've informed them of the impact and real costs of their requests for us to move, and now have a hearing in mid-December, which makes us hesitant here to speak in much further detail. We've continued to stay informed about our rights as the impacts of the situation increase in our lives by retaining a lawyer. We have found legal advice through the Law Society Referral Service, which we were connected to by the West End Toronto Legal Clinic after we fell just outside of their income criteria. To be clear, paying for legal services is making it completely difficult to meet our other life expenses, but to go at this alone at this point is completely unmanageable for us, as this is the second time we will be at the landlord and tenant boards in 3 years. As we stated in our first response to our landlords this spring, we do not rent because we consider renting temporary. Like so many others, we rent because we cannot afford to own. We are being asked to leave our permanent home for the second time in less than 4 years. If we have to move in the near future, we don't know how we will afford to stay in Toronto. We work in the arts and social services, and so staying in Toronto is now cost prohibitive. We have depended on our friends and community who have worked in politics to encourage us to fight this N13. As a white, university-educated couple, we have access to resources that more marginalized folks don't. This is a big part of why we are here. The city has become increasingly unaffordable for us and so many others. In Tanya's social service work, they've seen numerous youth receive an N13 and move out right away, immediately. Too many landlords see the housing crisis as an opportunity to increase their profits, and this has resulted in a continual increase of bad faith and frivolous N12 and N13 notices. We hope that Toronto's policies and procedures regarding affordable housing encourages landlords to familiarize themselves with the Residential Tenancies Act. We also hope that policy changes increase the building of affordable housing, which has been absolutely lagging in this city. This would help prevent unnecessary and vexatious notices, as well as mitigate the negative impacts of landlords who prioritize profit over people again and again, including our wealthy landlords. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry I went over time.
You're not supposed to clap, but I'm going to
I
allow
won't tell
that.
if you don't.
Was that for both of you?
Yes.
Assuming that was, yes.
We wrote it together.
Good. You're in it together. Good. Good support. Any questions of the deputants? I just have a question. How were you informed of your rights, that you have the right to return? Was that easy for you, or did you have to dig around to really find out what your rights were as renters?
A friend of ours used to work for Eggcorn, and so she told us to call the Landlord and Tenants hotline. She told us to contact the Metro Toronto Federation of Tenants, and we spoke to MPP Councillor Bell and MPP Jessica Bell and Councillor Mike Layton.
Okay.
But even with all that, our landlords have proceeded to take us to the board, which takes away our time from work and life and everything else.
Yes.
And is very stressful.
Thank you for sharing that, and I know how stressful it is. Anybody with an N13, it's a terrible time in your life. So thank you for coming tonight and sharing with us.
Thank you.
Next, I have Isabella Gamk, and behind Isabella, Benjamin James Puglia. You could be on deck,
Hi.
that'd be great.
you hear
Hello,
me?
thank you for coming.
Is this on? Is this on? Yeah. Hi, my name is Isabella Gamk. I'm a member of Acorn, But I'm here representing POOF, Protecting ODSP OW Funding. I'm the founder and the organizer for it. I've done many protest rallies and marches and stuff, trying to bring awareness to the fact that ODSP and OW shelter allowances are way below normal, and there's absolutely no way that somebody that is not in affordable housing can afford rent. These clients, there's a problem, like waiting I waited 20 years for housing. If people in shelters are expected to wait 10 to 20 years for housing, and every day they have to go there, and on their way there, they have to think to themselves, oh, I hope I don't have to I don't get assaulted. I hope I don't get robbed. I hope I don't get, verbally or physically assaulted. I hope that there's no problems. You know what I mean? I hope I get a good night's sleep. All these thoughts, over and over again, every day for 20 years. How are people? These cause mental problems. This is not good. This is not healthy. This is wrong. This is so wrong. Affordable housing does not seem to be working in my eyes. Toronto Housing is charging $139 rent when the province allows $390 for people on welfare and $497 for people on disability. In order to repair units and for TCHC to acquire more land, they should be charging $390 a month for rent for ODSP and OW clients. For them not to do this and not to capitalize on what the province is allowing, it's not called Ontario Housing. It's called Toronto Housing. So why is Toronto Housing only charging $139 for rent for people on ODSP and OW? Also, if people on ODSP and OW, they need their shelter allowance doubled, and even then, $497 doubled is only $994. Most people on disability need a bachelor or a one-bedroom unit, and the rent for that is is now $1,300 to $1,500 or $1,800. So average is if you gave them average market rent of $1,300, and they still have to dip into their basic needs, to cover the rest of the rent. Same thing with welfare. OW, $390 for rent. Double that, that's $780. A room is $800. Their whole check is $730.
Isabella,
you
can
can't
you
expect
wrap
people
up,
to
please?
pay that for that, And if the provinces, this is not just an Ontario problem, this is a problem all across Canada. And, the cities and the provinces got to start advocating to the federal government that if the provinces can't handle to increase the benefits and give people affordable rent money, then the province has to step in and give a shelter a top-up check to people that are low-income earners. They got to give the same thing or I don't know what you call it. Make a basic income check for people on top of their benefits.
Isabella.
Or a poverty line top-up check.
Can you, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, but
Thank
this
you.
is a problem, and
Appreciate-
I wish you guys would address it more.
Thank you very much for being
You
here.
know what?
Thank you.
I'm organizing a protest at Doug Ford's house on Christmas morning at 11 p.m. or 11 a.m.
You can
and
pass
if you really
something
care
around.
about people that are
Thank
homeless,
you.
you'll be there. And if
Thank
you
you
don't
very
care
much.
about it, you shouldn't be here.
Thank you. Any questions, the deputant? No, thank you. It's Benjamin James Pulia and John Plumador after. Benjamin.
Hi.
Thank you for coming, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
For approximately 2 years, myself and my neighbors at 394 Dovercourt Road have been subjected to a campaign to remove us from our homes at the hands of our landlords, Shebeg Singh, and his company AIPL Canada. We've endured the repeated attempts to buy us out of our homes, the lies about the reasoning behind these buyouts, the lies about the necessity of renovations, and now the multiple attempts to evict us through legal channels. We've endured many ignored or inadequate requests for service and maintenance. We've endured ignoble treatment by our building owners. We have been denied any contact with Shebeg Singh. We are unable to speak with him directly, even as he seeks to turf us. In our society, housing, which is clearly a fundamental human need, solely exists along a spectrum that follows a person's capacity to pay. Most renters are renting because they do not have the money for a down payment or to qualify for a mortgage. The Residential Tenancies Act creates second-class citizens. The Residential Tenancies Act tells those that are poor that they are not entitled to their homes. It tells us that landlords, by virtue of having money, have an ultimate right of expropriation. The idea that housing, a disembodied, generic, and infinitely replaceable combination of rooms, is what is being talked about when we say that housing is a human right cannot be the goal. I do not want to be infinitely displaceable so long as I may be housed elsewhere. I do not want to be quote-unquote housing without qualification. What I want is my home. So while Shebeg Singh and AIPL Canada may own my building, the recent purchase of which no one forced upon them, they do not own my home. And I see my right to my home as trumping their right to a building or a parcel of land. We are here this evening because the state does not see renters as having the same rights to their homes as those who happen to have the money to be quote-unquote owners. This is what must change. Many people rent for their entire lives. I've rented for nearly 2 decades in this city, and I have been evicted 3 previous times. This time I will not move. I will not be displaced again. My home is more mine than it is my landlord's. It is absurd to think that a multi-million-dollar organization for whom my home is a line item in an Excel file should be given priority, whether legal priority or some sort of common sense conceptual priority, over me, the person who eats, sleeps, sings in the shower, binges Netflix, cooks meals for friends, combats my cobwebs, makes love, and laughs and cries in that same home. So to the other renters here, let me tell you that your home is more yours than it is your landlord's. You spend your life in your home while your landlord spends your money. I am not here to tell you that I simply want to enjoy affordable rent. I'm here to tell you that I want to enjoy my life in the place that I live. So to the renters here tonight, let me tell you that you have a right to your home, and I encourage us to organize and exercise that right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the deputant? Who owns the place? I didn't hear you say
His
that.
name is Shebeg Singh, and the company is AIPL Canada.
AIBPL
Yes, P.
L
L.
Canada.
Canada.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. John Plumador, and followed by Dorota Zhang and Alex Durlach, if 2 of you are here. Is John Plumador here? You're Alex. Okay, well, I don't see John. John Plumador once, twice, 3 times. Okay, not here. If he comes, he can let us know. You're Alex. Is Dorota with you?
She's not. She's
Not.
able to make
Okay,
it.
that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. You have 3 minutes, Alex.
Thank you. I'm speaking as a representative of a small tenants organization living in the ward of Deputy Mayor and Chair of the Housing and Planning Committee, Anna Bailau. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank her and HPC for calling this subcommittee and for letting me speak on behalf of my neighbors. We are a group of low-income and precariously employed artists and cultural workers, some of whom are on OW and ODSP, occupying a total of 23 units, mostly old high-ceiling studios owned by landlords who also function as property managers. Right now, we are at a tricky crossroads which could lead to a series of very different outcomes. On the negative side, we face eviction by city action because our landlords are in a court case that seemed headed in that direction, or eviction because our building will be sold to one of the many gentrifying developers in the area who pressure our landlords daily. On the positive side, we could maintain the precarious status quo, or the more ideal outcome, the goal of our presence today, would be the purchase of our building by the Neighborhood Land Trust and the establishment of a nonprofit corporation dedicated to securing the long-term affordable housing for us tenants and for this city. This is our story so far. Our rents are affordable. The maintenance of the building is not great, but we have heat and hot water. Our landlords do not want to share details of their court case, but they have told us that it is due to the fact that we are sleeping in our units. With the assistance of Josh Barn from NLT, we have asked the city for information. Deputy Mayor Anna Bailau's office agreed to help us more than a month ago, but we are still in the dark. All the while, the clock of gentrification ticks faster and faster around us, and the health of our senior landlords is slowly failing. This speaks for the need for a tenants-centered approach by the city. Tenants need to have better access to sensitive information. This committee staff should be allowed to give attention to situations near crisis like ours. And most importantly, the city should rule out taking actions that threaten affordable tenancy. Coming back to the agenda items of today. All the recommendations that this subcommittee has listed before the city look great, and we are particularly appreciative of the creation of a protection of rental housing advisory group made of people people with lived experience. But when scrutinized more closely, the recommendations do not speak to the urgency on the ground. There is more energy spent on analysis, coordination, and surveys than on action. We need action. Therefore, this subcommittee must include the following recommendations. A housing fund that allows partnerships between tenants and land trusts to acquire and convert buildings such as ours into long-term affordable housing. Seed funding to help tenants and land trusts prepare for such a purchase. And housing subsidies to all individuals on social assistance so they are able to afford any potential rent increases that these existing building conversions require. Thank you for your time.
Did you have that written down?
Yes, I do.
Or did you turn that in already?
I don't think I have, no.
Okay. Would you like to give that to the clerk over here? So over here, and
Yes.
then we can have that circulated because you have it written down with some suggestions.
I have the other 2 minutes that I cut out.
Okay, all right. Thank you. You were right on time, exactly at 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for being here. Any questions, first of all? Any questions? No. Thank you very much. Alejandra Ruiz Vargas, East York Acorn, followed by Kenneth Hale, Advocacy Center for Tenants of Ontario.
So hello. I represent in Acorn today, and well, we live in the city that is becoming like the Wild West. When you are there in your home and boom, you receive a bullet, and it's an N13 or N12, you have to leave your home. So the landlords has too much power. So we need to take the power from them because we are not disposable. We are people. So Acorn believes there are 3 types of evictions that currently are happening here in the city. The first is the demo evictions, where landlords knock down buildings and build condos. Then evictions, where tenants that have lived 10 to 20 years in a building and pay affordable rent. Well, it's affordable for us, the tenants, but it's too cheap for the landlords because the landlords always they want more and more. So, and plus they have been ignored our orders, our work orders, and plus they have been harassing us. And this is what we call evictions. And then the last one is the renovictions, when the landlord say, I'm going to renovate, you need to leave. So for the past few years, we have been hearing about renovictions. This is a shady tactic from greedy developers to kick out tenants from their homes. So Acorn is fighting back against this from coast to coast. We are here tonight to demand a no displacement strategy for the city. The city should be denying all permits to renovictors. The city should be investigating fake eviction schemes. Homeowners live in their homes through renoviction. These renovictions are a lie and an excuse to get tenants out, nothing more. These developers and landlords are breaking the law and need to be stopped. We want the city to take action and follow the example of Burnaby and New Westminster in stopping renovictions. We cannot wait on the province for solutions because, you know, we're going to wait for ages. Oh, we need another premier. There is a lot that needs to be done. We want to highlight a few demands that should work because we saw that work in BC. We need a new financial penalty for landlords that break the RTA when it comes to tenants returning to their homes after a renovation. RentSafe is creating a new administrative penalty system. There should be one for renovictions as well. When tenants are displaced for a renovation, the landlord should be forced to find them new accommodation, close or for a similar rent, or the landlord should have to top up the tenant's rent. The landlord should also have to cover moving expenses and special.
Can you wrap up,
Okay.
please, Alejandra?
And a special consideration should be given the people with disabilities. So rent registration criteria expanded to include rents being charged. Anyway,
you.
you're going to receive a letter from us.
Great.
So it's
I have a
okay.
letter here.
Thank you.
So I think we have that now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you to Paula, and thank you for you to be here tonight
Thank
so
you.
late, because you really care. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And you've turned your letter in to the clerk? That you can turn it into the clerk, and then it becomes part of the official documents. Okay. Next up is Kenneth Hale. Kenneth Hale. Kenneth Hale here? You're not. Oh, you're not Kenneth Hale. Pardon me? Oh, okay, you're, and, all right. And will you tell us your name, please? Because you're not Kenneth Hale.
I'm not Kenneth Hale. I'm Magda Barrera. I'm here on behalf of the Advocacy Centre for Tenants Ontario, ACTO, a community legal clinic serving the needs of Ontario's low-income tenants. ACTO manages the Tenant Duty Council program across the province of Ontario. This provides legal advice to tenants at the Landlord and Tenant Board. In Toronto, we employ TDC lawyers in all LTB locations. So through our Tenant Duty Council program, we have seen the growth in no-fault evictions. These are evictions based on the claim of a landlord planning to move into the unit, so these are the N12s, or the landlord needing to vacate the rental unit for major renovations, so the N13 applications. Based on our TDC data, we've seen N12 applications almost double in 4 years. We've gone from 323 in 2015 to 595 in 2018. While still lower, the applications for renovations have also increased. We've seen them pretty much triple from 2015 to 2018. So these are very worrisome trends, and we're glad to have this subcommittee look into how we can address this. We work province-wise, so we've participated in consultations with the provincial government, and we've recommended action to limit the process of eviction for demolition, renovation, and conversion. We've also recommended strengthening the requirements for evictions for landlord's own use. We see that affordable rental housing units are being lost every day because these current policies allow the displacement of tenants. We are also concerned about the overuse of above-guideline rent increases that may increase rents beyond what tenants find affordable. We have urged action by the provincial government on new rules about what's eligible expenditures for an above-guideline rent increase. So while we understand that the RTA is a provincial matter, we support the recommendation that this subcommittee can explore ways in which the City of Toronto could strengthen tenant protection. For instance, use building permits and planning approvals as a tool to strengthen RTA protections. So moving on to another major challenge in addressing evictions, we have a serious lack of data on outcomes at the LTB. We simply do not know what happens to tenants after their hearing. There's also a lack of data about evictions in general, and I'm not just talking about N12 and N13 evictions, but evictions overall. Many tenants do not attend their hearing at the LTB, they simply move out. About half of tenants don't show up to eviction hearings to argue about why they shouldn't be evicted. Therefore, it's unclear if this was an eviction based on merit or if the tenancy could have been preserved. There's also informal evictions, about which we just hear about it anecdotally. Tenants who are told they have to move, and then they simply move out, and there's never an application for an eviction. So we have no data on the extent of this problem. So we agree with the recommendation that we need better data, and we would go beyond data on N12 and N13 applications. I think we need better data on evictions overall. And finally, we need programs that empower tenants and inform tenants to be able to contest these evictions at the LTB and build the capacity of tenant organizations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe Councillor Perks, you have questions.
Yeah. So one of the things that we can do as a council, beyond the recommendations you see here, is to recommend that the province do certain things and write them a letter, you know, the council and the mayor endorse this. Could you give me a better sense of what some of the specific recommendations you had made about tightening up the rules around own use evictions and eligibility for costs for Aggies?
Yeah, I can share a lot lengthier materials, but in general, it was about having landlords have to have a much higher burden of proof of the fact that they are moving into the unit. So not just say that their family members moving to you, but have some sort of mechanism where they have to demonstrate an intention to live in the unit and have higher penalties and an easier way for the tenant to demonstrate that it wasn't in good faith, so that no one ever lived in that unit, or if you see that the unit goes back into the market pretty much immediately, have some higher fees or fines for that landlord. So that kind of mechanism.
Okay. And on the Aggie piece?
Oh, yes. On the Aggie, it was having sort of tighter restrictions on what kind of repairs would be considered eligible for an above guideline rent increase. So nothing that would be considered general maintenance and repair could be included in an Aggie.
Thank you.
Brad, do you have any questions? I have, sorry. I just have a question about you talking about informing tenants so they know their rights and know they have a right to return and don't have to simply leave. How do you think that's working now? Are tenants really aware, or is there more that has to be done or can be done when you're facing an N13 or an N12?
My sense is that they're not aware. I mean, the fact that about half of tenants don't even show up to the LTB tells me that there's a lot of information that's lacking. So I don't think a lot of tenants are aware of what they can do.
And who can do outreach? Do you do outreach to tenants? Tell me a little bit more of your ideas to make sure.
Yeah, we do outreach. We also work with the community legal clinics who work in the community. So we have tip sheets for tenants. We do sort of tenant information sessions, that kind of outreach, and with other community organizations. But obviously, there's a lot of work to be done.
And the numbers that you gave us, you said the N13s had tripled, but I didn't have the actual number.
Oh, yes. This is only RTDC data. I should clarify
It's which
again.
data? Sorry?
The Tenant Duty Council data. So this is not for all of the LTV applications. This is our own data. So they went from 18 in 2015 to 71 in 2018.
Sorry, that 18 in 2015.
In 2015
to 71.
71.
That you know about.
These are the ones that we know about through the Tenant Duty Council. So there's likely a lot more that never make it to Tenant Duty Council.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for being here, and thanks for your work. The next is Brad Burney, and after Brad is Yvonne Wajimar. Brad, are you here? Oh, there we are. Brad.
Hello,
Great.
Paula.
I like your shirt.
Thank you, sir. Just say no to rent evictions, all right? My name is Bradley Burney. I live at 245 Logan Avenue, and I'm being illegally evicted. I've done nothing wrong to incite this eviction. I haven't violated my lease. I haven't disrupted fellow tenants, and I haven't damaged the building, and I've always paid my rent on time. The only thing I've done is belong to a lower socioeconomic group. I'm poor. I don't know if you can call this an illegal eviction, even though the Landlord-Tenant Board will rule this illegal if they succeed. Everything I read indicates that they will get away with this. They will pay the ineffective fine that is in no way a deterrent, and they will keep on doing business while I and the others will be homeless. A few years ago, I decided to pursue my dreams and go into the world of the arts. I looked for housing that would support this decision. I found an older building in the studio district that my profession could afford. I rented from the previous owner who looked me in the eye, ran the appropriate checks, and she rented the units at below market value as she wanted to rent to decent, honest people that would be clean, respectful to their neighbors, and that would pay their rent on time. Now, the building is owned by number 2653526 Ontario Limited, which I'm guessing is owned by a developer speculator. The definition of speculation is investment in stocks, property, or other ventures in the hope of gain, but with the risk of loss. But it seems that this system is rigged to ensure his gain and guaranteeing no risk of loss. My first eviction notice was signed by Briar Lane Building Management. The second was signed by D&D Paralegals. Now, I guess it's easier to do business hiding behind others, hiding behind an Ontario number limited, and behind paralegals. Every day I come home, I look under the door to see if there is a new eviction notice. The most recent letter I've received was a rent increase for 2020. Now, it seems that they want to make sure they get their extra $20.71 a month until they are able to throw me out. Since this illegal process began, I'm suffering from insomnia, I have stress and anxiety, and am under doctor's care. I've lost a relationship due to stress and the uncertainty of my future. They have given me an eviction date of December 31st, New Year's Eve. I won't be able to celebrate Christmas or the holidays. I can't even accept a portrait from my sister's family, as I probably won't even have a wall to hang it on. Now, my goal through this process is just to meet the person responsible for trying to illegally evict me. Look him in the eye and congratulate him on making people homeless for the sake of profit. My goal is to make it known to his friends and family that this is how he does business, but most importantly, to save my basic right for a home, and to save the homes of Roger Moores, Richard Iwanski, Martin Villana, Lionel, his dog Duke, Alan and Shelley, but most importantly, to fight to save my home.
Thank you very much, Brad. Thank you very much, Brad. And Yvonne, are you here? Followed by Randy McLean. Randy, if you could get ready. Hello.
My name's Yvonne, and I, up until very recently, didn't have very much literature or knowledge on tenant rights of any sort. But I went through this entire year of an N13. In 2018, an assets property management company bought our building, and we never, before, a person used to own it, and we had interactions with that person, but since this company bought our building, the only thing we ever got was an email that said, from now on, e-transfer your rent, and then we never had any contact with them until an N13 to kick us out in May. It's a 3-bedroom, and we were paying $1,500 for between 3 different roommates. We live in a building that has 4 residential units. So one of my biggest issues with what I went through was that we fall under the 5, if it's under 5 units, our landlord didn't have to give us any sort of compensation or even help us move anywhere. And I noticed that a few people that I've spoken already have gone through evictions. This was my first one. So I didn't have much idea of who to go to or who to turn to. But little by little, pieces of the community started coming together. And then the Globe and Mail did an article on my situation, which actually forced the landlord to show his face. Otherwise, I probably would have been like some of the other people who never would get to meet this company's face. I wanted to point out that amongst many of the difficulties, one of the hard ones is the landlord-tenant board is very difficult to deal with. Their phone doesn't work, apparently, and it's true. And I went through a lot of trouble. Like everybody's mentioning some of the time that they give up in their daily lives, so I went through hell because my biggest issue was everybody in my building had left. I think they got scared off. I don't know the full facts of how they left, but they all got scared off, and I didn't. So we were the last unit. And I ended up being, for 2 months, the last person, because even my roommates left. So I was the last person standing in this building, which made it ever more difficult to stand up to this company. The landlord-tenant board, again, to repeat, didn't make it any easier. And then when going there, they had made an error and actually didn't have us filed as an eviction in their system. So it made my situation very much more complicated, and the landlord obviously way more upset and aggressive to get me out. And this may not have so much to do with the subcommittee, but I wanted to really point it out here as well, is they had never turned on my heat, and and I had just left at the end of October. Now I'll finish. But an inspector came from the city and read that the temperature was in the middle of the day on a hot, sunny day, still 7 degrees below the standard 21. At night we were freezing, and they never enforced ever to turn our heat on. And I found that to be an issue. I don't know if that can be raised here as well.
Yeah, you can leave that with us. Thank you.
Yeah, his name was Stephen Moss, the inspector, too.
Okay,
That means
thank you. What's your address?
860 College Street.
860 College. And any questions? I do have one. Did you have any legal assistance of any kind at the Landlord and Tenant Board?
No. We didn't go with any, and I got that was my first time ever going into like a court setting. The duty counsel was there giving like tips, but we didn't know how to prepare even to go there, and I've relied on my community paralegal, the Parkdale Community Services.
Okay.
And our landlord was actually discovered to have, I think, kicked out other tenants in another building on Kingswood Road illegally. So what I was suggested to do was take this to a provisional court. I just didn't have funds to have legal representation to get there.
And who is the landlord?
Omega. It's also, I think it's ACLP 860 College Street. There's also numbers and letters, but the actual corporation is called Omega.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for this? Thank you very much for coming today. Appreciate that very much. Randy McLean, and after that, Serena Purdy is up. Thank you. Hello, Randy. Are you Randy?
Yes.
Good. Thanks for coming. You have 3 minutes, sorry.
Right.
Reminder to anybody who wishes to speak, we're cutting off at 8. We have a few other speakers since we started tonight. Okay, Randy, thank you very much. Off you go.
Hi, my name is Randy McLennan. I'm a paralegal in private practice with Truax Legal Services. We are a small firm of 2 paralegals who primarily represent tenants before the Landlord-Tenant Board and the Human Rights Tribunal. Historically, the majority of our cases that we do concern N12 evictions. Evictions supposedly for the owner's own use or purchaser's use, but which tenants believe are in bad faith. When a tenant contacts me, there has usually been a long history of attempts to get them to leave, through coercion, harassment, purposeful neglect of maintenance, and sometimes outright threats and intimidation. Deep financial incentives exist to ensure that rent-controlled tenants are evicted. Once a tenant resides in a unit, the landlord can only raise the rent by provincial guidelines. In this coming year, it's 2.2%. But once the tenant leaves, the landlord may charge whatever they like for long-term tenants, and this may represent up to 3 to 4 times the rent that a tenant is currently paying. N13 evictions, or rent eviction cases, are a growing area of concern for our practice. The big problem is that there's a major loophole in the RTA, that if a landlord unlawfully rents out a unit that a tenant was supposed to return to, the new tenant cannot be evicted. This is what happened to tenants at 795 College Street. They indicated that they wanted to return post-renovations, but the landlord unlawfully rented the units at 4 times the rent, ignoring their right to return to the unit. The landlord was charged the max at the LTV, which was $75,000, and this represented less than the profit that the landlords would have made on the unjust enrichment from these evictions. I would like to call attention to the fact that the same property management company that was involved in the College Street rent eviction case is also the one that has initiated N13 evictions against tenants at 245 Logan Avenue and 394 Dover Court. City Council has previously committed to ensure that the public consultation process on Toronto's housing plan includes a rights-based approach to housing in policy areas that fall within the city's jurisdiction. When the City of New Westminster, BC noticed that a single landlord had used rent evictions to oust long-term tenants, they responded with issuing fines and threatening to revoke his business license. Likewise, the City of Port Coquitlam is considering similar bylaws, to which the mayor was quoted as saying, "If your business model is predicted on the predatory practice of targeting those with the least means, then look elsewhere." Will the City of Toronto show their commitment to implementing a right to housing by ensuring that the predatory practices of business that profit off the eviction and displacement of low-income people will not be allowed in our city? Lastly, thank you. Lastly, Toronto City Council needs to provide material support to tenants and their struggles by expanding the Tenant Defense Fund. Currently, the fund only allows tenants to get assistance for fighting above guideline rent increases. This needs to be expanded to cover multi-tenant properties facing N12 or N13 evictions. The landlords, developers, and property management companies can hire a slew of lawyers, paralegals, architects, experts, contracts, etc., to build the case for the supposed necessity of vacant possession. The costs are exorbitant for tenants to bear if they hope to counter such an attack. When it was instituted in 1998, it only allowed for $1,000 for tenants to hire a paralegal or lawyer to defend an AGI application. Today, the amount of money given remains the same. Unfortunately, the cost of running a practice has gone up, as have the costs of living in the city. If either of me or my colleague were to lose housing, then we would have to shut down our business and leave the City of Toronto. Thank you for this opportunity, and thanks for all the tenants coming out today. It's power in numbers that we'll be able to win this fight. Thank you.
Any questions? Any questions? I have a question, Ren.
Okay.
Do you have that written down? Because
I do. I don't have it printed out, but I can email it to your office.
I think you
Or to
can
the city
send it
clerk.
to the clerk, and we'll give out the address. But
Okay.
there's many suggestions that are being
For sure.
made today, and all of those are going to be referred through to staff. So
For sure.
New Westminster and extra money for the Tenant Defense Fund. They're all really important recommendations.
Thank you.
And I want to make sure they are caught and transferred. So if you don't mind emailing that.
For sure.
We're going to give you the email address. Are you going to give him the email address? Oh, what is it? No. PHC, Planning and Housing Committee, @toronto.ca, and then you would say my deputation to the protection of affordable rental.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, who is next? Serena Purdy is next, and following Serena is Devon McKenzie. Thank you. You have 3 minutes. Thanks so much.
Thank you. My name is Serena Purdy, and I'm here representing the Friends of Kensington Market. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the chair and to the subcommittee for organizing this. Kensington Market is the most diverse community in the city, and it is a historically immigrant community. Part of the reason why it's become synonymous with vibrance is because of newcomers to the city, because it's been a sort of haven for economically disadvantaged people, for artists who are often otherwise pushed to the edges of the city. We have had a place in the heart of the city here. So I want to speak to that from a position of seeing it as a part of the fundamental character, not just of Kensington Market, but of Toronto. We see many of the people that you identified as part of marginalized communities or vulnerable communities in your report in Kensington Market. We've seen N13s and N12s being used in bad faith to evict residents. We've seen the kind of bullying as a business practice that many people are describing here inside of our community. And as a result, we're seeing our community being hollowed out. Over the last 3 years, we've struggled with two main things: short-term rentals and real estate speculation. And part of what we would like to ask for you here today is to consider addressing those root causes more explicitly in the way that you proceed further. In my own personal experience, I have lost most of my neighbors in my little microcosm inside of the market to short-term rentals very rapidly over the last 2 years. My neighbors are gone, and it's very difficult to describe in words what that loss really is. In our area, according to Airbnb data, there is 216 high availability listings. Those are entire homes or apartments that are available nearly year-round for tourists to live in, where residents once lived. And again, that is a very rapid shift. Point Two Homes estimated that there's about 66,000 ghost homes across Toronto. That was 2016 data, and identified that the main drivers, again, were short-term rentals and real estate speculation. We are heartened to see the recent ruling on the part of the LPAT and the acknowledgement that affordable housing is a long-term policy goal, not just for the city, but for the province. But but we need to see more. We need to see you address the root causes. We need to see things like vacancy taxes considered, and we need to see enforcement of those, of the LPAT decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? No, thank you so much for coming and sharing. Devin McKenzie, are you here? And after Devin, Debbie Reed is sick tonight, not able to be here, so Torben Wieditz is up next. Thank you for being here. You have 3 minutes.
On July 30th of this year, the front page of the Toronto Star had an article with the headline, "Tenant Takes Up Battle Against Landlord Loophole," with a photograph of a young woman sitting on the front porch of a Toronto home. This young woman is me, and this is my battle for affordable housing. On July 18th, the upstairs unit and I were served an N12. Since then, I've been harassed by almost constant eviction notices, 9 specifically. In 4 months, I've received 2 N12s, 6 N4s, and an N8. After I was served the first and what seemed to be a normal N12, something seemed off. There was a name on the N12 that I'd never seen before and wasn't on my lease. After doing some digging and with some help, I came across the title change of the house. The name on the N12 belonged to a young man who had purchased 1% of the house and only paid $9,000. So why would he need both units for one person? After waiting 3 months, the day of my hearing came, and they had withdrawn the case because they never paid the rent compensation they owed me. I had about 30 seconds of relief before I was handed the exact same N12, and a second article was then published titled, "Tenant Fighting Eviction Left in Limbo," and I've been there ever since. With never having met my landlords and the obvious lack of upkeep to the property over the years, I wasn't surprised to find out that this isn't the first time they've done something like this. After the article was published, I was contacted by 4 different people in 2 homes owned by the same landlords, as well as 2 others I found on my own. In total, that's 8 units that have been fighting the same landlord. The first woman to contact me told me her story about an illegal rent increases, and after 3 times at the board, the landlord sold the house shadily and under market rent. The second to contact me was 2 units in a home near mine, where our landlord had essentially rent-evicted them so he could add more bedrooms to 3 already small apartments. Now, what they don't tell you about fighting an eviction is that it takes over your life. It's like working a full-time job, except you never get to go home at the end of the day because your home has become the biggest stressor and you're constantly looking for solutions while trying not to cry at the thought of the rental market you can't afford. In these 4 months since the first eviction notice, it's affected my mental health, my job, and me going back to school because I live on a 3-month timeline of housing security. This 3-month timeline has caused my roommates to leave suddenly because they couldn't take the stress. These landlords simply see the numbers and the potential to make those numbers bigger and not the people behind them. It's too simple for landlords to do this, but the financial gain in this current market is more than the inconvenience of going through this process. For the tenants, it has become easier to walk away than to fight for affordable housing, and the landlords seem to count on that. There seems to be a direct correlation between the lax eviction process, shady landlords, and affordable housing. With the rising cost of housing, landlords like mine who own 17 properties just in the city of Toronto and 43 in the GTA have found loopholes to these eviction processes. There are no repercussions for landlords filing these notices and withdrawing them, and there are no repercussions for these landlords wasting our time and the board's.
Devin, can you wrap up, please?
Yes, sorry. This is something that needs to be seriously looked at. I'm on my second N12 in 4 months and still fighting. My case is a landmark case, and with people keeping an eye on what's going on, this case could set a precedence for what is to come and give bad landlords one more unfair way to evict tenants.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I just want to know, have you got a legal representation?
I do, yes.
You do, thank you. And is that, anyway, I just wondered if you do. Of course you do. You're fighting very hard. Thank you. Next up is Torben Wieditz, and after that, followed by Rosetta Alexoff from...
Would it be possible to switch my spot with Judy McNabb, who's right here, and
Okay.
in the list a few
Yep.
steps.
No problem.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Trudy McNabb, and I was a resident of 1305 Dundas Street West, and I was issued an N3, and everybody in my building, 24 units, everybody was kicked out, essentially. I was originally told by my superintendent, I never met the landlords, but the superintendent told us that we couldn't move back in. I knew that wasn't really the case, like legally. He also told me that they wanted to up the rent from what I was paying was $1,000 to $2,500. I researched and went and spoke to lawyers, and the thing that I was told was that the landlord could just secretly move people in while I was gone during the renovation, and I wouldn't really have any recourse. I mean, I could file something, but they would be fined, and I would still not get my apartment back. And then the other thing is they said if it was over a year, which the scheduled renovations were just under a year, that if it went over a year, that I would lose my ability to even fight to be able to move back in after that matter. So I ultimately chose to, I found another place to live, and it just wasn't worth it. But I just feel like it's like, even though technically you should be allowed to move back in, it's not really feasible or practical. And it's like, you don't want to live without, like, not knowing if a year from now I'm going to have a place to live. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions? No, thank you very much for coming. And then it is Rosetta Alexov, the Program Manager, Youth Housing Rights, Center for Equality, Rights and Accommodation.
We had a mix-up on the names from...
I'm sorry.
Sorry, we had a mix-up on the names from CIRA, so we're from CIRA, but it's not Rosetta.
Okay.
CIRA. I hope that's
Are you on the speaker, either of you on, or?
No, but we are...
That's fine.
We're from the same organization.
No, that's, I just wanted to make sure that.
Oh, we can make sure that our
listed
names
down later. That's right. That's great. Thank you. You can tell us your names and
Absolutely.
your time.
Thanks very much. My name is Alyssa Brierly, and I'm the Executive Director of CIRA, the Center for Equality, Rights and Accommodation. And here with me is Annie Hodgins, who for the past 6 years has run our eviction prevention and housing stabilization program. CIRA has provided services to some of the most vulnerable Ontarians and Torontonians during its 32-year history, and we started our eviction prevention work 20 years ago when the concept of eviction prevention was not widely understood or discussed as it is today. Among other things, we provide free services to Toronto residents facing eviction or a human rights violation in their housing that may threaten their ability to stay in their home. We're very pleased that the city is taking concrete steps to address the urgent need to protect affordable housing stock and address the important role that evictions play in preventing people from accessing or staying in safe and adequate housing. And we welcome the creation of this subcommittee and have 3 recommendations for your consideration. First, the city should consider expanding the mandate of this committee from addressing only illegal N12s and N13s to include all predatory evictions. It's not only N12s and N13s that are being misused by landlords in the current context. There has been a marked trend of landlords taking any chance they can get to evict tenants with other opportunities such as N4s and N5s for small indiscretions that would be overlooked in a cooler rental housing market. And most importantly, it is lower income and more vulnerable residents who are exposed to the latter type of eviction threat most often, and they are most likely to become homeless as a result. We hear about this every day on our telephone hotline, and I'll give you a few examples. A tenant received an N5 eviction notice for damage resulting from a cooking accident. A senior tenant in poor health received an N4 for non-payment of rent after being discharged from the hospital. A single mom who has paid their rent on time for years and has otherwise been a reliable tenant falls behind 1 month and receives an N4. And just today, we heard from a senior on a fixed income who could become homeless because their landlord is filing an above guideline increase and she will not be able to afford the new rent and will receive an N4. Every day we hear from people who are being evicted to make room for new tenants who will pay more for the same unit. When they are evicted, they often, quite literally, have nowhere to go. Imagine paying $700 a month in rent for your home and face eviction into a market in which the average price of a 1-bedroom apartment is $2,200. This is the situation that many people in Toronto are facing, and we hear about it every day. My second recommendation is to collect coordinated, meaningful, and comprehensive data about housing insecurity and take measures to address it on a systemic level as opposed to the current case-by-case approach. In order to properly allocate resources and address real needs, data should be collected to track predatory landlord behavior, tenant displacement, increases in rent above provincial guidelines, and changes to short-term rental stock. And finally, the city must increase funding to the underfunded housing services sector, allocating funds that are in proportion to the size and impact of the current problems. We need affordable housing, but we also need increased and better coordinated services to address the needs of those facing housing insecurity and homelessness right now. Over the past decade, we have watched as the circumstances of the people who call our eviction prevention hotline have become progressively complex, urgent, and desperate. Toronto residents regularly tell us that there's an urgent need for increased services to assist them. In an evaluation of our services...
Can you wrap up, please?
I will. In an evaluation of our services completed last month, 87% of our clients said we helped them stabilize their housing, 95% said more services like ours should exist. And yet for the fifth year in a row, our city-funded program has been extended without appropriate funding and does not have enough funds to cover its operating costs. As a result, I'll be meeting with our agency review officer next week to negotiate a reduction in our service levels because I can't make the numbers work. I'll leave that with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You may have some questions.
Absolutely.
Any questions? No? Brad? Yes, Councillor Bradford?
Very quickly, thank you for the deputation. What has been the increase in the request of your services with respect to eviction prevention over the past 5 years? Have you seen an increase? Or 10 years or whatever the number?
We, due to we haven't had any ability to increase our services, so we haven't sort of publicized them as much as we would like to. We have seen an increase in the complexity and the time that we have to spend on each case because people are just really not getting the services they need and there's really nowhere for them to go. So we're spending a lot more time with each individual that contacts us.
Are you getting an increase of people reaching out though? Is that, are there more evictions taking place today in this rental market than, say, 5 years ago? Was that safe to say?
I think that's safe to say, absolutely. In terms of our capacity to assist those folks, we've been pretty flatlined,
Right.
but we know that we're not able to fulfill the need. In terms of we break our client groups down into shorter-term clients and longer-term clients that we case manage over the period of several weeks and months. And over the 6-month period between between April and September, we saw a 37% increase in our in people who reached out to us with the more complex case management.
So you'd say the demand outpaces the availability
Absolutely.
of resources?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks very
Yes.
much. Thanks for the deputation.
And just to be clear, have you you have it written down?
I do.
Have you circulated that or given it in to the clerk so it can
I
be
have
part
not,
of the
but I can do
record?
that.
Pardon me?
I have not, but I can
Yes,
definitely.
because you have specific recommendations, so
Absolutely.
that would be helpful. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here tonight. And now it is Torben Wieditz from Director Fair B&B, and can we congratulate you on the LPAT victory? Very
Thank you.
good. And right after Torben, it'll be Margaret Dinsdale, please. Thank you. You have your 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to, there's one issue that came to our attention just, post the LPAT ruling. But first, I want to thank the groups and organizations that we have been working with in coalition over the last, since 2016, really, to advocate for short-term rental rules and regulations, among them ACORN, FMTA, and ACTU, who was most recently ACTU was with us at the LPAT hearing, defending the city's rules and regulations. So many thanks. One thing that is extraordinary with the short-term rentals is that we hear about it across the city, in particular in the downtown core and in neighborhoods that are most expensive. There are 21,000 listings now, out of which 5,000 are so-called commercial operations, entire homes that have been permanently removed from the market. And I just traded spots with Trudy McNabb because Trudy McNabb was evicted from a building that was run, and the landlord there is a landlord that also operates 20 other properties for the sole purpose of renting them out as short-term rentals to tourists. And over the last few years, we have seen many such cases in Toronto where rooming houses have been turned into, tourist hotels. Entire neighborhoods have been gutted. And we're somewhat optimistic that the rules that are in place are good rules, and that those will actually help us eliminating those people that are driven to evict people for the purpose of turning their properties into short-term rental operations. But the one thing that has come to our attention just over the last 1 or 2 days is that the legal counsels of the Airbnb hosts are already planning A, an appeal of the regulations at the LPAT, and B, trying to take advantage of legal non-conforming use exemptions. And that's something that will come back to the city eventually, that the Committee of Adjustment might be flooded with, hundreds of, such exemption attempts. That's something that we are very concerned about, and that I just wanted to flag with you as something to take into consideration and plan around. But also, the need for better data when it comes to N12 and N13 notices is something that maybe the city should consider in handing out short-term rental permits to short-term rental hosts to see if they not only are permanent principal resident of a unit that they want to rent out, but also B, if they have a history of, making this space available through illegal evictions. So I think that's something that we may want to pay attention to. This is all I would like to say for tonight. Thank you.
Maybe some questions. Excuse me, there may be some questions. You had 3 recommendations that we should be watching out for legal non-conforming uses of places that have been shifted over to Airbnb. Is that
That's right, yeah.
And data collection for addresses that would have been N13 or N12 that are now currently Airbnb. And was there anything else? And can you please write those down and send them to the committee so they become part of this record rather than us
we'll do
having
so.
to track that? You got the email address? Great. Thank you very much. Thanks very much. Next is Margaret Dinsdale, and after Margaret, Sean Desjardins. Is Margaret here tonight? Okay. Is Sean here tonight? Sean Desjardins? Okay. Adam Kuldijan. There you are. Come on up, Adam. And after Adam is Paul Kolinsky. He's here. Thank you. Thank you. You've got your 3 minutes. Thanks.
Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, so I want to give a very brief outline of what transpired between my roommates, myself, and my landlord. Basically, the heart of our issue is that, from our understanding, our landlord had done previous work to our home before we had settled there. Things like things for which he had got complaints, such as adding too many units to the house that we live in. I think there was one complaint about a year ago for that. And the issue, I think, is that for the 3 of us living there for, my roommate's few months, myself more than a year, he started to tell us about basically that we had to leave in account of doing renovations, for our apartment. This kind of went back and forth and was unclear for a few months, not being able to promise exactly what the duration of the renovation would be, things like that. And it all led basically to a hearing that happened on October the 7th of this year, where the Committee of Adjustment basically went through a series of minor variances, and of them were things like adding adding stairs to the patio to the back, as well as the painting and whatnot. But kind of thrown into that was reducing our apartment, our 3-bedroom, into a 2-bedroom, which was not glanced over whatsoever during that particular hearing, and the vote went through. And so I guess the big issue for us is I'm curious why the Committee of Adjustment did not consider the tenants, well, I should say before that, the issue of whether people were living in that apartment at all was not addressed during that meeting. And so I'm curious as to what, what to do going forward and what the reason for that was. We just want to know, what, where to go from here and what exactly are the ramifications of that.
Thank you. We can't give you an answer, but we undertake that that's a question that staff can look at. As we've heard the second time about what the Committee of Adjustment role might be in rezoning, renovations, agreeing to things that affect tenants. And we're certainly unclear about that, but thank you for bringing that to our attention. If you wouldn't mind writing that down and emailing it, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I have a point form of this in more detail I can send.
With the address.
With the address.
With the address, because that's how we find the Committee of Adjustment. And starting off with, it's a Committee of Adjustment issue that you'd like to address to the committee.
In the subject or something like that?
Yep.
Okay.
And the address and kind of what happened. That'd be great. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Paul Kolinsky. Paul's here, and after Paul is Kisti Matsu. Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Hello. Thank you, Subcommittee and Chair, for hosting this meeting. My name is Paul Kolinsky. I am a tenant at 394 Dovercourt Road. I have lived there for 10 years now, and our landlord, Shabeg Singh of AIPL Canada Holdings, is trying to evict me individually and as well the rest of the building, 12 of us all at once. I have been before the LTB 5 times now in the past year. So and so far the landlord has lost. And so we are acting as a group. There's a number of us here, and you will hear the name Shabeg Singh and AIPL several times now. But so my story is going to be repeated in a number of ways. So I would like to talk about things that I would like to see happen. I would basically like to have a city where it's basically impossible to evict any tenant who is holding up their end of the bargain. And right now it seems that the onus is on the tenant to prove that the landlord is acting in bad faith. Which is obviously the case with our evictions. I would like to see the onus be put on the landlord to prove that they are acting in good faith. I would like to see a moratorium on rent increases. Rent increases are the only thing that the landlord has given us consistently on time at the moment it is possible. And every single year my rent goes up. And even so, it's barely affordable, even based on what it was 10 years ago for me. I would like to see a moratorium on N12s and N13s, and I would like to see that it's extremely difficult for a landlord to apply and receive such orders, especially if they get those and fail, as our landlord has done. And also, it's like, yes, I will repeat that this is from my perception, this is a class issue. I happen to be in the renter class, happen to live in a city that has a massive housing bubble, which is driving the cost of the rental market and in the effects of homelessness and, our tenants being displaced. So, if these propositions were to come to pass, and if that would really dull the housing market, then I think that would be a wonderful thing. And because, yes, my right to my home, to have a place free of harassment, to live as long as I, am a good tenant and pay rent on time, which I do, should trump, the landlord's right to make a profit. Because right now, the reality is, if our stakes are that the landlords stand to lose some amount of return on their investment, but us as a whole renters group stand to lose our homes. So the stakes are very high for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Hang on. Maybe questions. Any questions? I just want to, you've raised a point about a failure once, a failure twice at the Landlord and Tenant Board, that there needs to be regulations of some kind, that you just can't keep going after a loss. That would be a recommendation that you'd like looked at. Isn't in our purview, but it can be something that the city would make a request of. But I'd ask you to put that in writing, so that's something that we're looking at.
Okay.
The number of times you can actually give somebody an N12 or N13 in 1 year. Would you be able to do that and send that to the address, PhD?
Yes, to the same email address.
Yes, please, yeah. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Hi. You're Kisti? And then after you is Anna Portillo from Parkdale. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Good evening, and I just want to say I'm one of the tenants from 394 Dovercourt, and to echo what Paul was saying, that there should be like fines in the millions for bad faith rent evictions. Like $25,000 per affected tenant is laughable. And none of that money that's collected even goes to those tenants who have been displaced, who have to deal with finding a new place and all of whatever that entails. It's just not fair. And maybe, how about some jail time?
Yes, it's criminal.
Especially for the repeat offenders, because how about calling bad faith rent eviction what it is? It's fraud. You know, N13's fraud, N12's fraud. It's perpetrated, you know, by the haves, like the non-renter class upon the renter class. And it's fueled by greed, and it has to stop. And I wrote a whole novel, but I realized we only have 3 minutes, so I'm going to end it there.
Any questions? No? Thank you for being here. Anna Portillo, and after Anna is Pablo Escobar. Anna perhaps isn't here. I'm going to move to Pablo Escobar and Jennifer Moxon from Dixon Hall. Is Pablo here tonight?
He couldn't make it, no.
Okay,
I'm just
thank
going to
you.
speak on our...
That's good. And after you is going to be Jordy Dent from FMTA. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. So Pablo, my colleague, has been working in partnership and collaboration with the Parkdale Land Trust. So we came up with this on our behalf for Dixon Hall. So dear members of the Subcommittee on the Protection of Affordable Rental Housing in Toronto, please accept the following as Dixon Hall's submission on item RH2.1, promoting the security of residential rental tenancies. We are fully in support of the subcommittee's focus on mechanisms used by certain landlords to facilitate illegal evictions. We also welcome the recognition by the city that increased real estate prices and rents are leading many landlords to utilize predatory practices to gain vacant possession of units, which, not subject to rent control, can then be offered to subsequent tenants at a much higher rent, leaving many other people evicted and in a precarious housing situation. The focus of the subcommittee, however, on N12 and N13 evictions is too narrow and should include predatory practices in general, and some of which we've heard tonight. In many instances, for example, N11s, agreements to leave, are signed by clients without being fully informed of their legal rights when landlords are attempting to gain vacant possession. There are a large number of predatory practices utilized by certain landlords that need to be taken into consideration. Moreover, this narrow scope on the use of N12 and N13s to gain vacant possession of a single unit to increase the rent for subsequent tenants can miss other predatory practices that are focused on the whole property and not merely just the individual tenants of the property. With this broadened scope for the subcommittee, we suggest that mechanisms be put in place to identify at-risk properties or risk rent evictions. Develop a training model for frontline workers to identify and support whole house issues. Provide coordinated supports to all tenants at the identified properties, and build in programs such as small site acquisition program where the municipality supports community agencies to purchase at-risk rental properties. As such, Recommendation 1C in the staff report, RH21, promoting the security of residential tenancies, which recommends potential mechanisms and data sources to track and monitor data on N12 and N13 evictions, should be amended to include predatory landlord behavior and other indications that a property is at risk for conversion, renovations, or speculation. Information for this data can be gotten through different city departments, tenant complaints to 311, housing workers, rooming house emergency response programs, etc. This information can be compared to a baseline property risk assessment, which would then trigger coordinated response. Identifying at-risk properties allows for proactive, coordinated eviction prevention responses with the goal of supporting tenants to remain in place and sustain the property as affordable housing. To do so effectively, housing workers require training to identify and report issues that may destabilize the housing of all tenants in a specific property and lead to the loss of the affordable housing in question. We therefore suggest that Recommendation 3C, the hosting of an affordable rental housing workshop, to address the issue of tenant displacement and evictions and ensuring that tenants have the knowledge and they are enfranchised with that, to fight the eviction, including solutions, be amended to include the development of a training module for frontline workers that focuses on issues that affect all tenants' housing stability and security.
Thank you. I'm going to have to ask you, and Gord has a question. Councillor Brooks has a question.
So I wanted to understand the piece about identifying at-risk housing.
Yes.
So give me a sense of how we would get that list.
So I think somebody mentioned earlier, like seeing N12s, like certain landlords will give N12s to like different buildings throughout the city. So let's look at that. Let's investigate that. That would be an at-risk property for renovictions where a number of tenants would end up, or even for that landlord in general,
right,
in all of the buildings that landlord may have in their ownership. So if we can identify that landlord or company or speculator or whoever they are as being an at-risk
a risk creator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then we could potentially look at mechanisms to curb that before it even happens, like so before the system gets bogged down. And also the education piece with frontline workers playing a key role in that. Yeah, we have legal services, but we've heard here tonight not a lot of people are enfranchised with how to even access those things.
Yeah.
This is where frontline workers can come in, right? We can do these things. Housing stability workers, we're already doing that stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe building that capacity so we can make sure that people in this situation are supported, even if they don't have the legal means or they just missed the legal means cutoff, right? Or the legal aid cutoff.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker, Jordy Dent from FMTA, followed by David Kinner. David is here.
Hello, members of the committee. In 2012, the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations began to see a stark increase in calls relating to legal rent evictions and landlords own use evictions on our hotline. We're asking that you take a number of methods today to ensure that landlords are following the law. I wanted to
put it as if you were reading it.
There.
There's two sides, but I want kind of you to take a look at that landlord's own use call graph. The last 2 years, you'll note they just went through the roof. You'll note that at the same time that this is happening, non-payment of eviction rent calls are going down. So at a time when tenants are paying more and more of their rent, landlords are doing everything in their power to evict them more and more. And if you look at rent eviction applications, calls that we get, if you look at purchaser's own use, it's the top graph, unfortunately. It's not the bottom. I want to talk first about the scope of this issue. We believe that based on the data available, this is affecting about 25,000 tenants annually, costing them about $400 million, $15,000 each tenant in increased rents and moving costs. This is huge numbers, and the bulk of these are happening in the city of Toronto. We have some recommendations around how to stop this. The first and foremost, we want you to, there's a recommendation around looking at this as criminal fraud. While landlord and tenant matters are rarely looked at through the criminal fraud lens, Toronto Police have charged tenants with fraud in extreme cases. So they do it. And while we would much prefer to see the province crack down on illegal evictions themselves, all of our attempts to see this happen and address this issue have been pretty much completely ignored. On that account, we're looking to see, and we're looking that Toronto Police be recommended to investigate fraud investigations and expand them to landlords, not just tenants. We're looking for you to create conditions for issuing permits for residential housing and rental housing. Landlords are able to evict tenants for renovations so expansive that the city requires a permit. However, permits are often issued after the landlord applies to the board, and there's almost no check and balance to see if they're doing what they're actually doing. So we're hoping the city will create strong conditions for landlords to obtain permits in order to prevent this kind of abuse. When it comes to landlords' own use evictions, we want the city to use tax information to stop landlords' own use evictions. So if I go to the assessment rolls kiosk, I can see who the owner is and how many tenants are in there. If you had a partnership with the Landlord and Tenant Board to release data on landlords' own use evictions, you could actually check to see if that was happening. And if you found out the landlord was lying, you'd be able to take kind of a monetary penalty against them, some kind of enforcement. More importantly, we would like to see landlords face penalties and consequences for breaking the law. A radical notion, I know. I've got 5 seconds, so if they apply for any rezoning application, if they apply for a redevelopment application and they have been caught doing this in the past, those applications should be immediately denied. Thank you.
There may be some questions for you. No, can I just ask a question? Because FMTA has a lot of legal advice. Did you get legal advice about the landlord being charged with fraud? Have you?
Yeah, several from several different sources, yeah.
Pardon me?
From several different sources, yes.
Legal sources, legal firms?
Yeah.
Okay. You have all your recommendations that you'd like to make sure, you've read a number of them. Can you make sure that they're given in to the clerk, please? So we.
I will have 10 copies of my deputation for anyone that wants them, yes.
Well, we just need the clerk to have it.
I will give them to the clerk.
Great. Thank you very much. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, next up, David Kinner, and after Evan Kelman, after David. Is David here? Is Evan here?
Yes, Evan is here.
Oh, you're Evan?
Yes, indeed.
Good.
Hi.
Hi, Evan.
Hi.
I don't think David's here, so we're just
No,
gonna
David's not here.
put you right in there. Okay,
Terrific.
please. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for holding this meeting. It would appear that there are a lot of professionals doing a great job, all of which I wasn't aware of. I'm a tenant at 394 Dovercourt. I'm a real neighborhood guy. I work at 932 College Street, which is at the on the north side of College in Dovercourt. It would appear that our social contract is broken. And I appreciate we're all here trying to fix it, but it strikes me that being poor is now becoming a crime. And so in our particular case, I'm hoping, because of our limited resources, that we can get
Sorry, he's just going to the washroom.
yeah, okay.
We don't let him
That we can have access to professionals in the building department so that we can adequately defend ourselves against the N13 evictions. So I'm curious if that possibility could be arranged and could be arranged for others. You missed that?
Yes, but this is a forum, you're going to give us your ideas, and you're going
Yeah,
to make
that's
that
my idea.
recommendation, and that would be a recommendation that would go formally.
Okay.
And we don't go back and forth, unfortunately. We're
That's
hearing
fine.
just from you and what your
Okay.
thoughts are.
I'd like to have, for our building and our situation, have access to professionals in the building department so that we can mount an adequate defense, because without it, we're going to end up on the street.
So that is your recommendation. Can you make sure you just send that as a line item to PHC, or write that down tonight and turn it into the clerk, so it's part of the record, and that you'd like to have buildings in the city of Toronto more involved when it comes to rent evictions?
No, I don't want them more involved. I want them to appear at our hearing.
Yes, I understand.
Okay, great.
But could you please, I can't direct them to do that, but they have to be more involved overall in N13. So if you don't mind doing that, do it tonight, one line, that goes into the record, and now buildings is got to be brought online.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evan.
I have a question, actually.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Brad has a question.
Go ahead.
Councillor Bradford.
Thanks for the deputation, Evan. When you received the N13 notice, is this the first time you've received one?
In my life?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Did you have a good sense of what resources were available to you, or where you should go?
No. No.
What was
I mean, we're poor, so, you know, you go to Parkdale Legal. I mean, it's largely word of mouth, and the community is organizing. You hear the horror shows that are going on for tenants in our situation, you know, in buildings close to us.
Right, so I was just trying to understand, so what the process was for you going to Parkdale Legal, that was largely word of mouth. You got in contact with resources and organization through the community through word of mouth, but not from the city, for example?
No, not from the city. Even though I think on the last page of the N13, there is a line describing the right of first refusal. But beyond what's on the forms.
Okay. Thanks for
answer
coming
your
out
question,
tonight.
no.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Evan. I'm calling Craig Prue, and after Craig will be Kira Hennick, please. Thank you. Are you Craig?
Yeah, hi.
Thank
Good
you.
evening. I'm Craig Prue. It's my story. New Year's Day 2017, my wife and I were issued an N12 and evicted from our home of 8 years at 98 Beaconsfield, which was sold to become a full-time short-term rental. Following a viewing appointment booked by Leila Ruani, we Googled the agent and found a Toronto Star article celebrating a local family that buys homes and turns them into short-term rentals to fund the boutique hotel business. Within 2 weeks, the home was sold and purchased, finalized, with the understanding family members of the new owners would be moving in. I contacted the landlord-tenant board, who were incredibly helpful, but essentially told me our hands were tied and informed us that our only recourse at the time was to challenge our former landlord for selling in poor intent, or with poor intent. At best, we'd be compensated for the cost of our move and the difference in rent each month for a year. And while that's certainly helpful in an expensive city, it does not replace our home of nearly a decade, the personal items we had to sell in order to afford our ridiculous new rent, for also half the space. As we've heard earlier this evening, going after our former landlord was not really an option. He's elderly with a wife on his deathbed and has been very good to us for pretty much 10 years. I wasn't about to take him to court for something he has nothing to do with. I believe it's highly likely my landlord's real estate agent was fully aware our home would be turned into a short-term rental, but I don't believe our landlord had any idea whatsoever. After we moved out, renovations started right away once we were evicted, and it was very clear a business was going in on the main floor. We found a listing for the business, which was an architecture firm, and watched their renovation progress unfold on their Instagram page. That sucked. After hearing from our former neighbors about many people coming in and going from the house and different cars always in the driveway, we found 2 different Airbnb listings for the same property, our unit, confirming our assumption and also making it very clear it was not a primary residence. I guess in closing, my wife and I recognize our privilege and value access to the resources we have, but realize that's not the status quo. My reason for being here today is simply to share my story and highlight this as a problem. I look forward to seeing how the city responds and appreciate the opportunity to speak, and also Airbnb for encouraging me to do so. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Any questions? I do have a question. I'm sorry. And if Kira could be on board. Just for that, is that operating as an Airbnb currently?
Yeah,
And what was the address?
98 Beaconsfield.
98 Beaconsfield.
Yeah, and if it's helpful, the main floor architecture firm is JA Studio Inc.
I'm just gathering that, I'm not sure, and I will ask staff later whether or not they have to have a business license, a commercial license of
Yeah.
some kind. So whether or not we have the ability to
Okay.
withdraw a license under those circumstances. I'd
Okay.
like to know.
I'm not sure when the house was sold, we were told family moving in,
Right,
not business, so
yeah.
if that's anything.
Well, many families are moving in and out of that
Right,
location now.
right.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing your story. And now Kira. After Kira is Melissa Goldstein, Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust.
Good evening, and thank you for the chance to be here today. Again, I speak on behalf of the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness, in turn representing hundreds of partners and agencies serving those experiencing homelessness and precarious housing in the city. So we're here today to speak in support of the report from staff for this item, as well as to demonstrate our support for the subcommittee and the planning committee as a whole in addressing these important issues. We do encourage the subcommittee, though, to propose or to broaden the scope of what can be done beyond N12 and N13 evictions, as you've heard many times here tonight, and to include the role of the city in supporting tenants who are at risk of and being threatened with all types of eviction in the report coming back in January. This could include ways to increase support for SSHA's successful EPIC program, that's the Eviction Prevention Program, or accelerate progress on coordinated access. We also think that discussions tonight and into the next weeks leading up to council could also be useful in analyzing and strengthening, if need be, the final recommendations of Housing TO and how they can, that plan can also contribute to limiting or ending rent evictions. Most importantly, though, we are here to make crystal clear tonight that rent evictions and other types of predatory landlord behavior directly cause homelessness. With the number of people experiencing homelessness only increasing, every item that Council considers in relation to housing must put what can be done to reduce inflow into homelessness and accelerate outflow from homelessness first. In this way, your decisions and actions will contribute to ending and not only managing homelessness. Anecdotal evidence from my discussions with TAH partners suggests that, on average, there are 3 to 4 illegal evictions every month in smaller buildings of 30 to 60 tenants, not to mention all the smaller buildings that you've heard much about from tonight, unfortunately. One of our larger partners has data on over 600 individuals that have been illegally evicted in 2019. When real estate analysts estimate that average rents have risen 30% in the last 3 years, resulting in most average one-bedrooms now being 2,500. It's not a stretch to say that many of these people who are being rent evicted are suddenly at risk of or quickly become homeless. We know as well that evictions of all kinds play a direct role in why people become homeless in the first place. The most recent street needs assessment of 2018 showed this and the dramatic way evictions drive particular types of homelessness. 31% of people outdoors are there for non-financial eviction reasons or being unable to pay their rent, and this is 27% for people in respite sites as well. That's a good chunk that we could be working towards making sure don't become homeless in the first place. Finally, it's important for all of us to tackle rent evictions and related practices because they in turn tar the reputation of all landlords. We have many remarkable and a large number of landlords who work with TH partners and other service providers every day and night to create access and support some of the city's most vulnerable people and tenants. So as we identify and root out bad practices, let's also draw on and augment what good landlords do. In conclusion, the TAH welcomes this much needed discussion. We applaud staff and committee members in the work done to date. And we trust that you all agree that there's no room for losing any more of our affordable rental stock as the homelessness crisis rages all around us.
Thank you. Thank you, Kira. Any questions? Any questions? No. Thank you. Thank you very much. Melissa Goldstein, and after Melissa is Joshua Barnt from both from Parkdale Legal Land Trust. Do you want to both come together up here? Where's Joshua? No? Yeah, from the Land Trust. And one more Land Truster? Might as well all be in one place.
Good team.
Oh, you're Anna, right? Yes, so these folks are all from the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust, and each have...
Tress is going to go first. This is the
Pardon
order.
me?
Tress is going to go first, so Anna?
Yes, that's fine, thank you. Make sure your
Hello?
microphone's on.
Hi, my name is Ana Teresa Portillo. I am the chair of the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust. I also work with Parkdale Activity Recreation Center as the rooming house tenant organizer with the Proactive Eviction and Preservation Pilot Program. I work with people who are defending themselves against predatory landlords and housing management companies. The attack on tenants in Parkdale is not new. It is a neighborhood like Parkdale where proud working class and working poor people, that for-profit landlords and management companies have created affordable housing as housing that is inadequate, inaccessible, and in persistent states of disrepair with prolonged exposure to toxic materials. Unfortunately, the terrible state of affordable housing stock in Parkdale is understood as a reflection of our working poor community and not linked to the for-profit predatory actions of landlords and management companies who cash checks every month while failing to maintain their properties or properly servicing their tenants. These deferred renovations have become the very grounding predatory landlords are able to extract more wealth from Parkdale renters, widening their profit margins. The rise of real estate investment trusts like Timber Creek, Starlight, and Metcalf have meant the economic displacement of community members and a stark spike in speculative vacancies. Private wealthy investors and corporate landlords use every tool available to them to push out long-term tenants. These predatory landlords target long-term tenants and unleash on them an arsenal of violent practices that beat and wear down tenants' abilities to defend themselves. For example, many tenants that make maintenance requests may not know that if these requests don't come in writing, they are flat out ignored. Often tenants have to put up with different forms of abuse and discrimination when requesting repairs because landlords and housing managers blame tenants themselves for the unaddressed disrepair. At a recent tenant neighborhood meeting, we spoke at length about landlords and housing managers calling tenants crazy in order to undermine their concerns or requests. Tenants face verbal abuse and harassment from landlords. Tenants shared stories of landlords entering their units to observe tenants' lifestyles, taking pictures of bookshelves, and gathering information that they may be able to use against the tenant at a later date. The abuse of renters increased. Tenants share stories of being at the landlord and tenant board and having their landlords tell specific tenants that they will not be included in the AGI application in order to dissuade the formation of a tenant committee. Tenants tell stories of rents increases legitimized by investment in security technologies, then shared stories of how security staff entered their units, intimidating and discriminating against long-term tenants. Predatory for-profit landlords and housing management companies are systematically targeting long-term tenants, investing huge amount of money and time in designing tenant-specific displacement strategies. Such an organized attack on renters require a comprehensive...
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to wind up.
My time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just finish your thought, and then we'll go to the next one.
I think my biggest thought is that tenants really want to know, are we here alone? You know, we're supporting tenants building committees in each of their building. That's the first step to identifying which building is at risk. But they're looking to each other and say, is the city really leaving us to these predatory actors, these criminals? And we have no defense but one another. And so they really want me to ask the city, you know, can we use all the tools available to us, not just focusing on these evictions, because that's really the end of the road.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think, Melissa, you're going next. Okay, please.
So my name is Melissa Goldstein, and I've been leading the Parkdale Neighborhood Land Trust Dwelling Room Preservation Policy Working Group. For the past 9 months, we've been working to identify policy and program solutions to preserve the city's supply of affordable housing and deal with the issues that Teresa just talked about. And our research and recommendations will soon be available in an upcoming report. The recommendations in the staff report that are supports this meeting are encouraging, but there are a few modifications that need to be made if this effort's going to be effective. So the first one is the scope here is far too narrow to adequately address the issues that people are talking about today. As you're hearing, N12 and N13 evictions are simply two of the many methods that predatory landlords use to get their tenants to leave. Whether it's offering to pay tenants to get out or bullying and harassing tenants until they leave voluntarily, there are many legal and illegal methods that predatory landlords are using, and all of them need to be addressed by the city. City staff must be directed to examine all kinds of evictions and efforts to force tenants to leave their units and address landlord predatory behavior that can result in eviction more generally. The first set of recommendations in number 1 then needs to be changed to reflect this broader scope. The proposed advisory group is a really important initiative, and we don't want this role limited to the matters that are recommended in the staff report. An effective solution will require an intersectoral collaboration, and it must be developed then through an intersectoral collaboration. And a single workshop is not adequate for dealing with such a complex issue. Instead, we want the advisory group to be involved in meaningfully working with city staff on the substantive changes to city processes, policies, programs, data collection and monitoring, and tenant support that staff are being tasked to work on and report on. The city and advisory group should also explore changes to the Residential Tenancies Act to stop predatory eviction and not just to address the misuse of N12 and N13 notices. Efforts to address predatory landlord behavior need to be adequately resourced to be effective. Staff should be directed to identify what resources are needed for these efforts to be effective. And while changes to the Provincial Residential Tenancies Act would improve the situation that we're dealing with here significantly, there's a lot that the city can do as well. You've heard a lot of solutions. A lot of other cities have, this is not a situation that's unique to Toronto, and a lot of other cities have identified and implemented other solutions. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that they've done, New York City created the New York City Tenant Support Unit, which targets neighborhoods where there's a high risk of tenant displacement. Support unit specialists proactively go door to door informing tenants of their rights, documenting and case managing tenant issues related to harassment, repairs, and eviction, and they make referrals to legal support. The city also created a Tenant Harassment Prevention Task Force, which is a collaboration of city agencies, departments, and the state's Attorney General, which investigates complaints from tenants, community groups, and elected officials, and brings enforcement actions, including criminal charges, against landlords who harass tenants by creating unsafe living conditions through illegal construction.
Melissa, that's your time.
Already? Okay, that was like the beginning, sorry.
Please turn all your
Josh,
recommendations
carry on.
into the committee. Make sure all your recommendations go into the email address I've given out. And now it is Joshua.
Okay. So
Here we go.
in 2017, we undertook a study in Parkdale looking at the crisis of rooming house loss in that community. Put that one image on there. We identified that, the other side, please. We identified that in the last 10 years, we had lost 28 buildings to conversion and upscaling, displacing around 350 residents. And, you know, that's just in one small neighborhood. We know that this is happening across the city. And of course, a majority of that push out is the result of the type of predatory landlord behavior that's being discussed tonight. Since then, organizations in Parkdale have been trying to mobilize local initiatives to address the issue of this predatory landlord behavior, the eviction of tenants, and the loss of affordable rental housing in the private market. I want to share some ideas that we've been thinking about that will be in a report, but nonetheless I think are important. Our lens on this is looking at dwelling rooms and rooming houses, some of the most affordable housing in our city, but of course it's relevant to other housing stocks. So number one, the city has to move quickly to legalize multi-tenant housing across the city. While the adequate provision of a full range of housing, including affordable housing, is an established priority in the province and municipal legislation, in the city's zoning bylaws and licensing requirements, dwelling rooms are distinct from self-contained rental units. Dwelling rooms and their tenants are not covered by many of the laws that protect self-contained units and their tenants, and in most cases, equivalent policies have yet to be developed. Zoning rules prohibit multi-tenant housing in much of the city, zoning rules discriminate against people who cannot afford self-contained units by making the housing form that they need illegal in Scarborough, North York, and East York. Legalizing multi-tenant housing across the city through a right as of right zoning would better protect existing tenants and enable them to defend their rights better. Allow housing conditions in multi-tenant housing to be improved through regulation, allow people to stay in their communities and people of all income levels an opportunity to be a part of the community. I could keep going, but this seems like an obvious first step.
You got other recommendations, or is that just the
Yes,
only one?
I'll go to the second one.
You have 30
The city needs to create a dedicated unit, a tenant support unit, which brings together staff from the different city departments to, on an ongoing basis, coordinate tenant support activity. We have an emergency response protocol for rooming house closures. We have a bunch of other programs, but there's not coordination at this point, so there needs to actually be an office, someone who's responsible for that coordination. We need the city to create a proactive eviction program, a proactive eviction prevention program. We've piloted it in Parkdale. It involves getting legal information and supports out to tenants in buildings that are at risk by predatory landlords. It involves supporting tenants to form tenant committees so that they are organized to continue to defend their tenancies as they have been doing, but nonetheless as they must continue to do if they're going to keep their housing. The city needs to fund that, and I would recommend funding the legal clinics to do that through an RFP program.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of these great folks from Parkdale? No? And your great counselor. Could you make sure you turn everything in to the clerk, those recommendations, because they'll all go to the staff. So if you don't have them written down, if you could find some way to do that, or just send in what you've got, please.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And the best way to secure the housing is to purchase it, make it nonprofit or publicly owned. Thank you.
Right on.
Next up is Eurydice Baumgarten, and after is Joy Connolly. Thank you. There's Joy joining us. Come on, can we get Joy a chair, please? Yes, up here I think there's one. Over here, Joy. Come on over. Yeah, you can go sit there if you want. Okay, thank you very much, and you're up.
Oh, hi. So, you know me, I'm a tenant worker and I'm a tenant organizer. I help tenants to create and maintain tenant associations. I'm here mostly to share my experience with tenants and some of their problems. I'd like to start saying that I work downtown. I work at Carleton College Young area. And working downtown every day this winter that has started early, I have seen fresh homeless people in the street. I give them money sometimes, I buy them a coffee, and I see them just falling apart as I see them arriving with their suitcases and their little things, and in a week or two, I see them reduced to complete abjection, degradation, anything that happened when people that had a house is living in the street now. I say that because just for a beginning to say that in the last few years, I have seen a surge in evictions and above guideline increases, and more evictions followed by more above guideline increases. And I'd like to say that eviction is not only, don't only happen through an N13 and an N12. It is the continuous harassment of tenants with the objective of getting rid of them and change more for the units. I had tenants here that I work with, and I have one tenant here that I work with that I don't know if she's going to be able to talk today. Her mother is 97 years old. She is alone in a building that is being renovated. That's a place called Davin Hill. This woman, this 97-year-old woman, is being harassed daily and having notes on their door saying, "You are now alone in the building. You are the last person here." They want her out. No, and this is a really bad thing. From the people that I worked with, I can't tell their stories, but I just have a few things to say that happened to people. One person had a renovation of her building, and then had her things changed to another apartment and had her possessions stolen in the amount of $7,000. the company, Achilles, is not paying. I have people that have people coming into their apartments and doing things without notice, and they are only caught because the tenant put cameras.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up. You're
Yeah.
3 minutes.
I have people that have babies that are 7 months old and are having construction without any notice.
Yes.
And does the city allow that? So I just wanted to let you know what happens.
There may be
I
some
live with my
questions
tenants.
of you. Where is the building with the one 97-year-old woman living?
It's called Davin Hill. It is at, what's the address?
877 Young Street.
87 Young Street.
I will speak.
Yeah, Diana will speak for her mother, I hope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that very much. Joy Connolly, thank you so much for joining us. And after Joy will be Cara Kay, and after Cara, Jeremy Edwards. So, hello, Joy. Nice to see you up and about.
And I'm so glad you're here, and I'm glad this committee is starting up. It's very exciting. I'm not here because I have new recommendations. You've heard a tremendous number of good ideas, and they all sound great to me. I simply came to affirm what you and everyone else in this room already knows, just how important the work of this committee is. You know, I'm a housing geek, and so I think about preserving and protecting units. But the real goal is preserving and protecting Toronto. It's about protecting Toronto's economic base. We need the working class to stay in Toronto because they do all the work, and we can't afford to lose them. It's about the next generation finding a footing in the city they grew up in with the stability to have children of their own. It's about protecting cohesive communities. Over the past couple of weeks, I've been reading about the history of Cabbagetown, a working-class neighborhood that lost 10,000 people in 1 decade, some voluntarily, like homeowners with kids selling their homes to childless singles and couples, but also many involuntary moves where low-rent rooms just disappeared. It's happened in other neighborhoods. It's happening in Parkdale now. I know you, as a committee, need to keep a tight focus. But as you do the deep dive on predatory practices, I hope you harness the advisory committee to make the lateral connections. So when the city thinks about vacancy taxes, they can make the connect because taxes help stem financialization, which is the driver of displacement. Make the connect when divisions are working at cross purposes. At a meeting in Scarborough, a representative from Fire Services said with pride that he had closed down 40 rooming houses. That's a minimum 160 people losing their homes. What are we doing? Make the connect in harnessing the power of community ownership through the acquisition rehab, through land trust to protect what we have. In the East End, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Bradford, you know of the many, many units that were bought historically over a 20, 30-year period, the houses, the apartment buildings that are providing great service now. It's hard to do that fresh now in your wards, but we could do it elsewhere. Which leads me to this. You are all downtown councillors, and many of the advocates we've heard today are downtowners too. But when I was recently in hospital in North York, I saw starlight signs in front of modest apartment buildings and thought, here we go. The rental buildings in Weston, in Thorncliffe Park, all over Scarborough are the Jameson Avenues of the future. They're next, and we can't afford to miss this moment. Save these homes and you save Toronto. Good luck.
Thank you. Any
Thanks, Joy.
questions?
We'll get right on that.
Any questions? Well, it's great to see you up and about.
Thank you very
Getting
much.
better. Thank you. We need you, Joy Connolly. Cara Kay. Cara Kay, are you here? And is Jeremy Edwards somewhere in the building? Okay, you're up next. Okay, you can come up after Cara. Thank you.
My name's Cara Kay. Thank you very much for having this today. I'm just sharing a story. I was sort of encouraged by a friend, and this is our second time in a situation where we've been issued an N12. My husband and I live in a 750 square foot apartment in Regal Heights with our 3 young children who attend school and daycare in the neighborhood. I work about 2.5 kilometers from home and my husband about 4K. It's cozy, but it works for us. We've lived in our apartment for 12 years. We love our neighborhood, we love our neighbors, we are respectful tenants, we are members of our community. We are respectful and we pay our rent on time. 2 months ago, we received our second eviction notice from our landlord. The first was issued 2 years ago, just shortly after our 3rd child was born. Or yes, 3rd. And I forget sometimes. It apparently was under the pretense that the landlord needed the apartment for one of her 2 children, and one of which already lived in the building. And of course, 2 days later, we see her apartment up for rent on Craigslist. And we sought legal counsel. We're wisely advised just to hang on, keep cool, and we did a bunch of sort of back work on our end, but we simply said to our landlords, we're not moving out. And we waited to have a landlord-tenant board meeting, which they never failed. They failed to sort of file. Nothing has changed our relationship in those 2 years, and a month and a half ago, we received our second N12, and this time on the pretense that the landlord wants to move in herself. We know this is not in good faith, and we are going to be calm and cool, and we are going to pay our rent, and we are going to wait for a landlord-tenant board meeting. And we hope that at the landlord-tenant board meeting, they will be able to let us at least negotiate a reasonable move-out date. For us to move out, January 1st that's when our N12 is asking us to move out, would be moving our children out of their school, finding daycare for the older 2, finding daycare for a toddler, and then trying to find places, being able to get ourselves to work. It is incredibly disruptive. It is destabilizing for our family and for our communities. And I'm simply sharing the story because I know we're not the only ones. I just talked to a friend the other day and they said, oh, landlord-tenant boards, they're backed up by about 3 or 4 months in terms of getting a hearing because we are not the only ones. And I'm simply here to say, this isn't right. We are in a crisis. My husband and I are not, we are educated. He is, at the beginning of a new career, and we are looking at a situation where we might have to leave the city if we cannot find affordable housing. And we will. We have to move anyway, and it's going to be incredibly painful. So the other side of the story is there's the N12 and the N13s was also affordable housing, which nobody has mentioned today, but how come our developers aren't building affordable housing? This is a huge problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Cara, and I'll just let everyone know at our last Planning and Housing Committee meeting, we just proceeded with the first of 11 sites to build affordable housing at 777 Victoria Park, one of the 11 Housing Now sites. So we're trying, but not fast enough, and not fast enough for landlords that are run-evicting people and evicting them in the city. So I think here is Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy Edwards. I'm going to ask Renan to speak first. We're both from
Sorry,
the same building.
you're both from the same building, Renan and Jeremy. Thank you. Okay, yes, please go ahead.
I'm going to try to make it as short as I can. I've been fighting a major development corporation who has multiple contracts with the city currently. It's Aspen Ridge Homes, the parent company's Condrain, which are contracted by the City of Toronto. My name is Renan Yildizdon. Myself, Natasha McDonald, have been living at 109 Niagara Street Coffin Factory Lofts for the past 14 years. Jeremy has been living there for over 26 years. The Coffin Factory was home to over 100 tenants at one point. In 2014, the landlord applied for a rezoning application in order to develop the building into luxury condominiums. Unfortunately for us, the city staff report failed to mention any residents living in that building. And as a result of that, these condo development proposals went through. We have notified previous councillors, the city, multiple times by email and phone that people are in fact living in the building, and this is prior to the city staff report survey. Upon our cries for help, here's what I have from the city staff, Deanna Chori, who wrote this to us. My colleague, now retired, attempted to gather information from tenants demonstrating residential use of the building. However, for reasons we were not aware of, the tenants did not come forward, indicating that they used their units residentially at the time of the planning report was considered by the council. The decision by City Council in 2014 granted permission to redevelop the property at 109 Niagara Street. The permissions provided for under the Planning Act are now in force and effect, meaning the staff cannot overturn them. We have fought and won our A1 residential rights that the Residential Tenancies Act applies to 7 units. There's about 8 more applications currently, but the city right now is, not recognizing as tenants there and not overturning the ruling, which is in direct conflict with their ruling, obviously. Unfortunately, since then, Aspenridge Homes have resorted to shutting off our water on multiple occasions vindictively. We are currently without primary source of heat as they have stripped the boiler to the building where there was 100 units, and there has been video recorded incidents of sexual harassment multiple times, as well as physical assault, which I didn't feel it was right to bring here today because that is not the point of this meeting. But all I can tell you is that we are fighting a major development corporation who made over $300 million of sales and managed to illegally evict everybody by way of forging an N13 document that was delivered to everybody. The word N13 was taken out, replaced with Schedule A, and all our rights as tenants were taken out, and it was stated in that document, which is identical to an N13, that this was from the LTB, and this would result in us getting evicted. Well, it worked. They have gotten rid of many people, except us 3, and we have been fighting tooth and nail. Unfortunately, after all our fight, I have come to realize, as the building owner, Darius Ryback, told me in a personal meeting after the sexual harassment incident, you are nothing. There is nothing you can do. We have been developing condominiums for many years. Most you're going to take about is $5,000, $10,000, and you will leave. I'm afraid after 6 to 8 months of fighting it and losing my job, my savings, and not having a place to go and facing now proper eviction because they've sort of proper N13s, I believe the man was right. So I have no longer any faith, unfortunately, in the city of Toronto and our social system, which is completely broken. And this is, it is almost over anyways. There is nothing else to develop. All the artists have been kicked out. The entire poor community has been kicked out. They have succeeded. And this is thanks to lack of laws to protect our poor citizens, unfortunately. So I hope, please, you can make a difference and you can make a change and hold people accountable for the terrible things that they do to people that don't have the resources to hire legal aid or lawyers. And we're going to fight till the end as long as we can. Thank you.
I would like to just add a few things to that, please.
Yes, please. Yep.
Okay. The coffin factory,
Is it the cotton factory?
Coffin factory, casket factory, Dominion
Sorry,
Casket.
yeah, okay, yeah.
It's at the corner of Niagara and Tecumseh Street. And I was fortunate to get a place there to live about 26 years ago. I'd arrived in Toronto broke, doing shows at the Rex Hotel, and another artist said we were looking at some studios. And I walked into a studio that used to be owned before me by Steve Williams. He actually generated the first CG dinosaur that he sold to Lucas, and they made Jurassic Park. Also, 2 other Academy Awards came out of that building, including one that I got in 2005 with a Parkdale director, Chris Landreth, for Ryan. I never got paid for that, but I produced it. I was the initial producer. The NFB sure got paid for it, and everyone else. So being taken advantage of as an artist is something I'm kind of used to, unfortunately, because the ecosystems that we build, the cultural ecosystems that we allow for in the city, is really what helps us to clarify and move our identity forward. With that in mind, I've been producing Indigenous programming with Indigenous creatives for the last 14 years, including 2 Heritage Minutes on residential schools and on treaties. I'm currently trying to finish a television series now, but because of the landlord's actions, the ability for me to work out of my studio has been greatly, but the people don't want to come there. The building's getting filled with mice and rats. They haven't cleaned it up. They just served me a bloody N4 today asking for $21,000. And they haven't even given me a key to the bloody building, and they board up my door upstairs to my bedroom so I can't escape if there is a fire, and nobody can enforce this. One of these N4s is for my art studio across the hall where I have my paintings and paint, but I can't get into it because they boarded it up. They won't allow me in, yet they're still charging me rent. How can they get away with all this? And in the city, I parked there for years. I parked right beside the stairs and in between the stairs and a tree by my loading dock. I've got $1,000 in parking tickets since last July in a place I've been parking for 25 years. So it's like the city's after me as well. You know, it's making life very difficult because I don't know how I can plan. Like my daughter asked me, are you coming for Christmas? I said, I don't know if I have to just stay here because I'm the only thing that's keeping them from demolishing the building by me being there. Even though they've taken what once was a vibrant community, a baby born down the hall, people married, you know, a whole artistic community, and turned it into just a trash hole. You know, so living in that after knowing it as something much more than that has been a bit saddening. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to look that zoning application up while we're all here. Yeah. Like Daryl's going to, you guys are going to look that up now. 109 Niagara. Thank you very much. Roger Moores, followed by Josie Weir.
Council and city staff, my name is Roger Moores. I live at 245 Logan Avenue. And according to a website put up this summer, our landlord wants to evict us and triple the rent. And the average tripled rent would be $2,300 a month. If I or some of my other tenants were evicted, if we could find us something in the same area, we'd have to pay another $800 a month, which is $9,600 a year, and over a 10-year period, $96,000. The landlord, at $2,300 a month, that would be $27,600 a year, $276,000 for 10 years. But fortunately for him, he has 20 units, so that's $5.52 million in rent revenue. We, on one hand, have a $96,000 shortfall over the next 10 years. He has a rent revenue of $5.52 million. If evicted, we would lose our homes, and we would definitely feel abandoned by the city. And of course, the unexpected stress of finding a place and moving. Resident profiles in our building indicate fixed incomes, health and mobility issues. Some lack the skills to raise this $9,600 a year, which amounts to a $260 a week raise gross and $184 net. Renovations are undergoing in our building, and we're experiencing dust, noise, infrequent garbage mismanagement, workers with no permits, workers with the wrong permits, workers working on the weekend, and they had the balls one Sunday to come back and work in the evening as well. There was a water turn-off unannounced. Doors are unlocked and propped open. All this produces an unknown future. Lani Sarha, of the former director of Canada Without Poverty, calls this financialization of housing. People's right to housing has become a commodity to be bought and sold on the global market. People, like us, are a noisome impediment to speculation and greed. Financialization of housing produces gentrification, undermines community solidarity, exacerbates inequality, and adds to the disgrace of homelessness.
Roger, you're going to have to wrap up.
I would be remiss not to take this opportunity to address the members of City Council, MPPs, and MPs who are well aware of the much documented and attested plight to renovation. If your conviction is to maintain the status quo, well, this must be what you want, or you would do something to change it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Josie Weir is next, and after Josie is Amelia Ettinger. If you're here, Amelia.
Oh.
You Josie? Are you Josie, right?
Yes,
Great.
Hi, my name is Josie Weir from East York, Acorn. Thank you for organizing this meeting on this important issue that many people are facing. Doug Ford will never do anything to protect tenants because he's in the pockets of the developers. So the city needs to be a leader. We need enforcement of the laws and the city to use its planning, permits, and other powers to stop rent evictions. We need a landlord and tenant registry to track displaced tenants. We need a no displacement strategy, no more building permits to rent evictors. And we need rent top-ups for displaced tenants with massive fines from the city if landlords stop tenants from returning home. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much today for coming, Josie. Is Amelia here? No. If Amelia's not here, then Loretta Fisher from Scarborough Acorn. Is Loretta here? Yes? And after Loretta, Nicholas Beauvais. Is Nicholas here? Yep, okay. First of all, Loretta's going to be addressing us. Good evening. And then you're up next, Nicholas. We're just figuring out that rezoning up here. Thank you for joining us. When you're ready, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Loretta Fisher, a Toronto resident and member of Scarborough Acorn. Approximately 10 or more years ago, I lived in a condo at Kingston and Eglinton, my home for almost 14 years, where I brought up my daughters in a community with a group of other condo owners. We thought we were owners until we were rudely awakened and asked to pay between $15,000 and $18,000 on top of our mortgages for repairs to the garage. The condo board lied in their newsletter and said they met with the group of residents who were concerned and wanted some input into finding cheaper contractors. How did I know they lied? Because I was the leader of the tenants group that they never contacted. So we then contacted lawyers who said that what our condo management was doing was wrong. But then after researching the then recently updated Condo Act, our lawyers returned to tell us that actually there was nothing they could do about this new loophole, where management could completely disregard receiving our monthly maintenance fees and also charge us thousands of dollars to be paid within 24 months or be penalized with fines on top of that. No one had this in their bank accounts. So at least 10 of us tenants out of 50 organized and told our neighbors that we would try to run for the board and replace the lying board members who were effectively putting a lien on our properties, because at that point, if we tried to move, we'd still have to pay $15,000 to $18,000, depending on the size of our units. It was a very slow and painful process, and we did not win against this board, who stacked the vote with proxies. We fought hard for our homes, but one by one, we all eventually had to move. It's hard to describe all the other loss that came with losing my home due to unaffordability. Personally, I had to use my job severance pay to try to save my home, but it still was not enough. This type of defrauding people is still happening. Now I live in a basement apartment with the looming possibility of being rent evicted again. It's a recurring nightmare that unfortunately comes true for many renters in Toronto. Where can we possibly move next time that will be affordable in this rising rent crisis? And where is my daughter and my grandson and all their neighbors in 3 apartment buildings at Birchmount and Finch? Where are they going to move to? The landlord of their building put in a new laundromat, new windows, new lobby floors, new elevators when there was nothing wrong with the old ones. And their rent is increasing over $700 up to $1,800 in total. Everything is now shining and new, but now over 500 families are living in mortal fear of being kicked out of their homes. Their humble apartments because they cannot afford the shiny new rent. Seriously? Are politicians being lobbied by building realtors to price tenants right out of their homes? These tenants are people. People of all ages, races, and incomes being unfairly uprooted, and there's no affordable housing for them to move to. Even if we had somewhere to go, this is really, really bad for healthy living. How is this a safe environment for anyone?
Thank you. We may have questions for you. I do. I just have a question. You said about the 500 families. Was that, did you say Birchmount and Finch? Did I hear that right?
That is correct.
In a building?
3 buildings.
3 buildings. And was that an above guideline rent increase that you're aware of?
I believe so, and my daughter is here, and she will be one of the deputators.
I see. Because, of course, Jordy Dent is right here, if you don't know him, from Federation of Metro Tenants, which fights the above rent increases. So, Jordy, why don't you get on that? And please, you should hook up with him, she should hook up with him tonight. That's a good time to network with different services that are here. So thank you for that.
Okay, and that's all the questions?
Jordy, can you meet her daughter, please? She's going to be speaking later. And then there's Jay Joshi. Is up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Amelia. Jay Joshi, followed by Loretta Fisher. Jay Joshi not here, thank you. Loretta Fisher? Oh, that was you. Oh, I'm sorry. Jay Joshi, not Nicholas. Sorry, Nicholas Bobin. You're right here. Please take a seat. After Nicholas is Robbie Hamilton. We only have 50 more people to go. No, I'm just joking.
Hey, I'm just glad I'm here anyways. I got hit by a car today, so.
Oh my gosh, we're glad you're here too.
Well, it's loveliness about living in downtown Toronto. I'm here today not to give any recommendations, as you've had already received many recommendations. I'm speaking about the dealing with the aspects of living in a, excuse me, is this? I live at 16 St. Joseph. The building has been now going through severely alterations to the historical aspects of this building. While this has been going on, we were assured that the building was not going to be affected at all of its historical aspects or characters that the people in the building itself have grown to love. Sorry.
Move your chair up a bit.
All right. The fact of the matter is that tenants have lost any kind of hope for the building itself since Aquiles is now taking over. Prior to that, we had dealt with Medcap, Starlight, or Transglobe back in 2007 when they purchased the property. When they purchased the property, they started to remove the windows because of a rebate. Those windows were key characteristics of the building and helped carry the building's character aspects, as well as help support those buildings, the walls of the structure itself because of the balustrades inside those windows. Once those windows were started to be removed, then the structural aspects of that building started to shift severely. My unit itself has been severely altered due to this. After I had fought them to repair my unit, Medcap, they sold the property to Aquiles. Aquiles has now been a monster, man. I live at home 24/7 due to a leg injury. Having to deal with a company that is constantly ripping up my building, constantly living with the noise, constantly worried about the fact of having ceiling dust coming into my food because of the constant amount of renovation being done to the building. Now they have plans to add 5 additional units to the historical garages that were some of the first indoor heated garages. The neighborhood used to be mansions. It's called Bay Clover Hill. It used to be full of mansions, and then it began with the automotive era in 1920s when they started to produce more industrial buildings. Most of those buildings are all gone, except 16 St. Joseph. It has stood there for now 90 years, unaltered. And now it has been just completely destroyed. And you know, it's sad when you reach out to the historic board and they don't even care. What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to fight a monster like Aquiles from destroying communities like ours? We have people in our building now that are just so fed up that they don't want to even fight much anymore. How is that fair? You know, I want to be able to live in Toronto until the day I die. It's not looking like that with the way the rentals are. And with this, I don't know how much longer I can stay in my unit. At some points, I wonder when my ceiling's going to collapse and fall on one of my dogs. You know, it's things like that that I'm unsure about. Because it looks like I live in Alice in Wonderland's funhouse. It's not even a joke. And having to deal with the first property management to get this dealt with, and now having to deal with Achilles, who has no interest in giving us our parking back, no interest in giving our storage back. No, they intend to pit 5 additional units, take away our laundry room and move it to another side of the building. But, you know, unfortunately, I can speak all night about the issues that I'm going through. The thing is, the matter of the fact is Toronto needs to do more for the people that are renting units, especially affordable rentals. Those 5 additional units they're planning on adding are not going to be affordable. They're luxury units. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nicholas. Pamela Mills, followed by William Goddard.
Excuse me? Did you say Robbie Hamilton?
Yes, I did. I did that. I said that before, and then I didn't say it again. Are you Robbie Hamilton?
I am Robbie
Okay.
Hamilton.
After you is Pamela Mills.
Thank you. I have figures, I have numbers, and I'm just going to run these really quickly. If you make minimum wage in this city and you work 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, your gross income is $29,120. Divide it by 12 for 12 months of the year, and then take 30% of that, because affordable housing is 30% of your gross income. That means affordable housing for someone making minimum wage, working full-time, is $728.10 a month. I'm lucky. I don't make minimum wage. My gross is just over $40,000 a year. Take 30% of that, $12,300, divide it by 12 months of the year. For me, affordable housing is $1,025 a month. I live at 1501 Woodbine Avenue. I've been there 15 years. I have never paid my rent late. I have never shorted them. I have just received my 3rd N4 notice. Both times before, it was a clerical error, and it is the same this time because I have my bank statement with me. My rent was taken from my account on November the 4th, and they have served me an N4 notice, not because a check was returned NSF, because it was returned as a duplicate item, whatever that means. I was on the phone this morning with Bank of Montreal and with TD to try and get it figured out, and they're all still shrugging their shoulders, saying, yes, you've paid your rent. Why are they serving you notice? Well, I'll tell you why. Because I looked up how much Metcalf is charging. If I go in there today to rent a 1-bedroom apartment, $1,649 a month for the same unit that they're trying to get me out of. That's all I have to say. This is just not right. It needs to be addressed. And when you're looking at building affordable housing or making affordable housing available to the population of Toronto, affordable housing is 30% of your gross. If you're paying more than that, you're digging into other things like food and clothing and the ability to have anything outside of just working your ass off to make your rent. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Robbie, there is a question for you. You took off too fast.
Thanks for coming down tonight, Robbie. I appreciate it. I was wondering if you had a chance, if you connected with Inspector Digby Burke today.
No, I did not.
Because I understand there's been some fire issues in the building, and they were going to follow up.
I am acquainted with that because I am part of the 1501 Woodbine Tennis Association, and I have spoken with Helen Chellis about it. I know that there are serious violations in the building.
Okay.
We're still trying to get things addressed from the 2013 audit.
So you did not hear from the inspector today, though, just to confirm.
Personally, no, I did not.
Thanks very much, and thanks for your deputation.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And now it is Pamela Mills. You're Pamela,
Hi,
and after
good
you
evening.
will be William Goddard. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I believe that one of the key points that needs to be considered when speaking of affordable housing is the quality of living standards. I also live at 1501 Woodbine Avenue. I've lived there for 10 years. Property standards bylaws were put in place to protect tenants' rights. Unfortunately, property standards in some multi-residential apartment buildings are not maintained to code. Overseen by municipal licensing and standards, it became apparent that enforcing the bylaw when landlords chose to ignore city orders was next to impossible. To this end, the MRAB program was developed, and when it was realized that this was not enough again, and the city was still having problems enforcing the property standards bylaws, another program called Rent Safe TO was put in place to ensure rogue landlords were held accountable. We have been waiting 6 years for our building to be brought up to code since it was audited in 2013. Since the inception of Rent Safe 2 years ago, it would be nice to say that the program has been successful. Unfortunately, our building is still not up to code. It has finally been brought to light in the last couple of weeks at City Council meetings that municipal licensing and standards, admittedly, does not have performance standards. And after waiting 2 years, they failed to present a report on the enforcement results requested by City Council on the new Rent Safe program. The basic health and safety of tenants, thousands of tenants, living in some multi-residential apartment buildings has been ignored. Our expectations of better living conditions have been ignored. Municipal licensing and standards under the City of Toronto has ignored their licensing standards under the City of have ignored their obligations and have not been held accountable to enforce the property standards bylaw that was put in place to protect the tenants of the City of Toronto. The City of Toronto is not holding negligent landlords to the law. This injustice at the expense of tax-paying tenants must stop. If we are going to speak on affordable housing in this city, the city must first prioritize standards of living in the buildings that already exist and make landlords accountable. Municipal licensing and standards have been asked again to report in the first quarter of 2020, and I'm asking the subcommittee on the protection of affordable rental housing to request a copy of this report from MLS and work alongside to ensure safe, healthy, secure, and affordable housing for all tenants. Adherence to the property standards bylaw for landlords and enforcement of these bylaws must be a priority during this housing crisis.
Thank you very much. There might be some questions. Any questions? I'd just ask you, you had some recommendations. Anybody that has those, again, turn them over to clerks or email them phc@toronto.ca, but we need to get those all in the pipeline. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And William Goddard, you are up next. And after William is Leah Dixon.
Thank you for inviting all of us. My contribution, try to make it short, was that we have an economic transition that we want to make, but we fell down the well so far that we don't even know that that's what happened to us. So the question is, first of all, recognizing...
Could you just move a little closer up there, William?
Oh, sorry, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So my My observation is that we can get out of this well by just looking back to what happened in 1930. We had this genius of an organization called the League for Social Reconstruction. And it made recommendations which actually flowed through to a lot of things that we take for granted today. And to translate that, for example, the Broadband Institute has recognized that we need some kind of a network of citizens to work together, or organizations like to be effective. So that would be to solve the problem of it seems to be the motivation of building all these buildings and abusing all the, both the environment and all the people. To do that is because we don't understand how to change the economic system to make it easy. And we want to make it really, really hard. So the solution would be to understand that we can change the economy, and that's exactly what they did in the 1930s. We can do it through, well, innovations that are possible. Now, the recommendations I would make is how those can be done, how the funding could be done through mortgage and housing, to have the endeavors at the city level and probably the provincial level to do the whole city to transform the building itself. We have ancient technologies being used. The renovations in 245 took 2 months when they should have taken 1 day. Now, this is it's not the workers that are at fault, it's the bad technology. And it's old and stupid. Okay, so we're getting off old and stupid is not always easy. So that's my recommendation, is we can do that. I would put together some guidelines as to how that could happen. I know the city can't do it all by itself, but it is important in this kind of organization where we've got a two-level government to have the city step up and empower I guess you could say all levels of government to make, like for example, even the Senate was wondering, what's their purpose? Well, okay, I'm sorry. Originally the Senate could have done the job it should do. And that's what we want to, that's my proposal, is that we can empower the Senate to help us get that done. I will.
Mike's not. Thank you very much. And then Leah Dixon. Diane Robinson is following Leah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Loretta Fisher's daughter, she mentioned.
Yes.
So we live at 65 Silver Springs, Birch Mountain, Finch. Metcalf took over in, I want to say, the end of 2016, 2017, and have been steadily making renovations since. On November 6th, I received a very fat envelope saying that I have to be in court on December 2nd for a hearing. It has a list of 425 families that also are expected to be there as well. I'd like to say that since the beginning of summer, I filled out 3 work orders for roaches. That really wasn't a problem until they started their renovations. They never responded. This is my cousin's daughter, and this is my son. They said they were, when they first took over, they said they were Metcalf, which I'd heard of. Then they put up Starlight signs, so I asked them, why doesn't it say Metcalf? They said, because we're Starlight Investments. Then I'm trying to pay my rent. I'm like, do I say Metcalf or Starlight? They say, no, you pay IMHX Pool, some sort of weird long code that sounded very shifty, but that's who I've been paying my rent to since then. I'm concerned for older people in my building as well who will see that fat envelope, not speaking English, and we've gotten so many different notices for different things that I don't believe they know what's happening or what's going to happen. All of a sudden, they're just going to be out of a home. Also, they said that all of their renovations were needed. They were not needed. We needed new windows, for sure, and we needed new elevators. They say they put in security. They did not do it properly. You know those, the buttons you push and then the door opens? It was never installed on the wall properly, so now it's just hanging off the wall. And I'm sure they're going to blame us, but they never installed it properly. That's all I can think of right now. I'm going to let my cousin's daughter, Jalissa, say a couple of things.
Okay.
My name is Jalissa.
Can you just put the mic on and move close up so we can hear you? Come all the way here. We need to hear everything you have to tell us.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Jalissa, and I just found out we might be evicted since we cannot afford more than it is already. We won't have enough money for our other needs, such as food, clothes, and even schools like college and university. Once we move, where are we going to go? My parents are tired of paying more and more until we finally can't even afford to live in our own apartment. Why do they treat people like this? We're just trying to get by. I have many neighbors who also want to stay. I just want to ask city councilors to stop our landlord from raising our rent over $700 just because they did renovations. P.S. Even the people who don't have renovations in their house are still paying over $700, which is not fair. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is my son, Nathaniel. He's got something to say.
My name is Nathaniel, and I want to help my mom to be able to afford the rent, but I found that the salary for students under 18 years old is $12.20, which is not enough. Please don't let our landlords raise the rent to $1,800 because the $60 raise is already enough.
Yeah, so they're raising our rent as of January 1st, $60, and it's always ever been $20.71, but it's getting raised $60. Plus they want, I'm currently paying $1,005 for my one-bedroom plus den, and new people coming into the renovated units, which is just lipstick on a pig. It's not very much renovated at all. They're paying $1,860 plus hydro plus parking for my same crappy unit. That's all.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Was this a rent increase that you've had? And so over here, Jody Dent's right over there. You should just go and talk to him about that before you leave tonight. Thank you. Do you mind just going over and talking to the, sorry, I'm sorry, she's going to be coming over to see about the rent increase. If you'd like, if you're on the list, we'll be hearing from you. No problem at all. Thank you. Philip, I'm sorry, maybe I don't know if you're on, but I'm happy to hear from you at the front. Philip Autenbright, followed by Chris Leated. Is Philip here? Pardon me? Oh, Diane Robinson. Yes, Diane. I'm missing people. Thank you. And after Diane is Philip. Yes,
Thank you,
please.
first of all, for holding the meeting and having the opportunity.
Hard to hear you, Diane. Can you get
Thank
right
you for holding this meeting and for allowing me to speak. My name is Diane Robinson. I'm here to represent my mother, Betty Robinson, who is the 97-year-old tenant that Eurydice Baumgarten referred to. My mother has been living at 877 Yonge Street for 5.5 years. On July the 3rd, the residents were informed by a form letter addressed to Dear Resident that the building facility would be closing by the end of the year, and they would have to find alternate accommodation. Now, this is a seniors home, which is also under the the Retirement Homes Act, as well as the Tenancies Act. So the closure that you're talking about of the facilities has to do with the retirement homes. They have not addressed the tenancy issue of the building. So no one has actually, that I know of, have been provided with what I understand is an N13. Some people were given an N11, the mutually agreeable eviction notice, a blank one. people have been harassed. I personally feel I've been harassed with emails, phone calls, asking when my mother's going to leave. And the other issue is we understand the building has been sold for $30 million to a numbered company in Toronto. So we don't know what's happening with the building. We assume it could be demolished for condominiums. Basically, it's another situation where vulnerable people are being displaced from their homes, probably because of greed, and there isn't any real protection for them. And I would like to see, in terms of your advisory committee that I understand you're forming, is at least one person on that committee who will represent seniors, because they are a growing demographic and they are very vulnerable. I'm not suggesting other people aren't, but seniors, my 97-year-old mother could not possibly come, although she is very able in some ways, but to come and deal with a lot of these things. As your DC mentioned, she's the last person in the building, and they keep reminding her of that and sending her letters asking her when she's going to leave. They want a deadline from her, and I consider that to be harassment. The other thing I think would be important to look at, which other people have brought up, I believe, is the fact that real estate is being redeveloped for the benefit of investors versus housing that people really require. And also, in this particular case, this was run by a not-for-profit, I believe, on land that was maybe leased, something to do with the city. We can't find out from the city who actually owns the building and the land, and that's something we've been trying to find out, and we would really like to know so we can find out actually who the owner of the building was that benefited from the $30 million sale.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe somebody can look that up and get back to you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming tonight and representing your mother. Philip Autumnbright. Philip, are you here? No. How about Chris Leated? There's Chris. And after Chris, Helen Chillar. Chiller? Pardon? Chillis. Oh, I've got Chillar here. Helen Chillis, okay. You'll be right after Philip. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Chris Lathede. I'm here to tell my story. So I'm a former resident of 38 Kensington Place in Kensington Market. And Kensington is the kind of neighborhood that for a long time has been a home to many vulnerable populations as well as artists. I myself am an artist. And the building that I lived in, 38 Kensington Place, it housed about 30 residents and one very vibrant artist studio in the basement. And in July of 2016, about a week into the month, people that we'd never seen before basically knocked on our doors and said, "We're your new landlords, and as of when we owned the building 5 days ago, you now owe 50% more rent." And this was the beginning of a very bizarre and aggressive process. So I suppose the building was obtained through power of sale, so there wasn't much communication. The owners were Claude Baton and Baton Holdings, and they used many aggressive tactics, so filing illegal eviction claims, trying to forcefully enter our apartments. A particular aggressive tactic they used was my downstairs neighbor went away for the weekend, and they pulled a van in and began evicting him by taking all of his possessions into the van. Thankfully, in a neighborhood like Kensington, we had the group Friends of Kensington Market who really helped mobilize the community. In that case, they blocked the van in, but I can't even imagine if there wasn't that kind of support group, he would have literally just lost all of his possessions. So that was a very long and arduous process. I and my roommates ended up moving out after a couple months of this. The police were called on this landlord and his crew at least 10 times within the first couple of months. Let's see, so I personally ended up moving out because it was far too strenuous, and I've ended up moving into about 4 different apartments since, and the building completely emptied of all 30 people Two held on for about a year, and the rest of the building was turned into a ghost hotel. It was turned into Airbnbs. It still had a long history after that. The landlord ended up dividing the units further into smaller Airbnbs, and it ended up being condemned because it was breaking fire codes. So it has spent a lot of its life since 2016 empty. It did turn back into Airbnbs, but because of the recent changes, it is now empty again. So I just wanted to share that story. It was a very stressful time in my life, and in Kensington in particular, and most of Toronto, the statistics were mentioned earlier of, I think, over 200 short-term listings in the Kensington neighborhood, which is a very small pocket of the city. It's only really one major block squared, and people losing their neighbors in their community. So, yeah, I just wanted to share my story and say that we really need swift and comprehensive approach to the source of the problem. Obviously, the changes to the Airbnb regulations are good, but we can't stop there. As well, a big thing that pissed me off, pardon my French, was that there was no consequences for this landlord. There was, just the horrible aggressive tactics they used. There was just really nothing, even fines. I hear that through the LTB, fines really don't actually end up being enforceable necessarily all the time. I could be late on that. Oh, I apologize. I will wrap it up.
That's good.
That's it.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. Any questions? Any questions for? No? Okay. Then it would be Helen next. Helen Chillis. Sorry, I had an R at the end of your name.
Okay.
Hey, Helen, long time no see.
Hi. Well, good evening. I have been here. My name is Helen Chillis, and I'm with the 1501 Woodbine Tenants group. This week alone, I've been here 3 times, and we keep discussing the same things. I'm happy to see that things may appear to be moving forward, but I personally do not see much change when we just need to do something now. I'm just winging it because I've been so busy emailing. I keep getting the kind of N4s, eviction notices, sheriffs at the door, mistakes applying. We're talking evictions. I probably deal more with our neighbors, and there's 304 units, than even the property manager. I'd like to talk about some potential solutions. I'm not sure if any of you are aware, but as tenants, we are not, in accordance to Ontario law, we are not protected by the Consumer Protection Act. Because I'm not even sure. I have been in many, many meetings with the former Liberal government, and there was no reasonable explanation there. I highly recommend that City Council does write to the Doug Ford government to include tenants as consumers, and what that would entail is potential criminal charges, because that does fall under the Consumer Protection Act. Now, as far as new developments, we speak of affordability. I am disheartened to hear that our public property oftentimes is either sold or leased to commercial developers who have reduction in taxes, developmental fees, you name it, for a few token one-bedroom apartments. I think it's time that the city, and I understand it is costly, it is very expensive, but I think we can come up with better models in order to build housing that belongs to the people. And that way we can be in charge and in control. And if our buildings are falling apart like they currently are, but right now, even in Toronto housing, we are addressing that and moving forward. We also should perhaps consider, we always speak of rental, perhaps making it easier and more affordable to buy. And there could be some models around that. We have a lot of available property. There's a lot of options. And the kind of numbers we're hearing from developers are so overly inflated, I don't know where to begin. In addition to that, what we need to do as a city, I live in a building that falls under the property taxation, older multi-residential apartment buildings. We fall under the commercial tax regime. It is high time the City of Toronto put us into parity. And this is probably one of the only issues that even the industry themselves will line up, and you will never hear them lobbying at your door. So we need to bring that down. If we bring the property taxes down in older apartment buildings, the average family will save anywhere from $85 and upwards of $250 or more, depending on the current value.
Thank you.
I do realize yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you
and I
very
do
much.
thank you for your time, but we need to move faster.
Thank you for being here for 3 times. That's great. Appreciate that very much. Could you just tell me the name of the building? Was it Metcalf's?
It's another Metcalf building,
It's another
yes.
Metcalf, isn't it?
And by the way, I think a lot of people may be confused. Metcalf doesn't tend to own buildings, they're simply contractors. Yes, property management contractors, just like many others that don't simply do what they're paid to do.
So who owns your building? You know?
They're called our Sandco Investments, a very, very, very wealthy private family. That's fine, no one is debating that. However, we've heard that they're now in talks with the city to build more buildings in another area, in property that they own, even though they are, have been deemed, in the past at least, one of the worst landlords in the history of Toronto.
Thank you.
And that conflict of interest, I think, needs to be addressed too.
Thanks so much for being
I do
here.
appreciate you being here this evening. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 more deputants, Elisa Brierly, Barry Marsh, and Tanya Mock. Is Elisa here? Nope. How about Barry Marsh? There's Barry. And is Tanya here? Tanya? Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, Barry. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Barry Marsh, and I'm with the Acorn chapter in Etobicoke North. And what we have noticed is that landlords are offering tenants buyout of $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, which is a lot of money for a low-income family. And another complaint that we're having is that the repairs, when they're requested, they're not being addressed. When they do address them, it's a long period of time. Over this week, it's just a couple of weeks ago, one apartment had an old pipe burst in the 16th floor, and it affected up down to the 7th floor. And the lady living in the 16th floor, it was days before she was afraid to turn on her stove because the water was so high. And it was days before they came to even speak to her. So we're having those problems in the high-rise apartments up in the Etobicoke North there. And we are requesting that there should be a policy to prevent buyouts or policy to make sure that the repairs are being addressed in a timely manner when it's requested. And I thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Barry? No? Thank you very much, Barry, for coming down. And our last speaker tonight is Tanya Mock.
Hi, hello, Council. My name is Tanya Mock. I'm an organizer with the community group Friends of Chinatown Toronto, also known as FOCT. We were the group who erected the parody sign at the corner of Spadina and Darcy last week, which was to draw attention to the matter I'm here to speak about today. And this directly relates to points in your report regarding racialized communities and the process surrounding the formation of affordable housing. FOCT was formed to address concerns surrounding a proposed 13-story development from Reichman, Podium, and Bosfields, Inc., slated to replace more than about 10 business units at 315-325 Spadina Avenue, which includes the popular dim sum spot Rolsan, as well as Ding Dong Bakery and other services. Last night was the first community consultation, and I'm sad to say we left the meeting feeling pretty appalled at what was said. Of the 239 new units, none were described as affordable. In fact, the subjects of affordability, Section 37, and include inclusionary zoning were skirted altogether at this meeting. It's clear that this development process goes directly against former city studies for Chinatown, like a 2017 study calling to make the area more livable for seniors, or calling attention to the shortage of social housing in the area, coupled with studies that show that Chinese and Vietnamese communities have the lowest social capital amongst any other ethnic group in the city, exacerbated by the large number of non-English speakers. It was FOCT, our group, that had to demand the presence of Cantonese and Mandarin translators at the meeting. FOCT that disseminated flyers about the consultation with both English and Chinese text. Many businesses in the actual building would not have known about the meeting yesterday if we had not gone door to door ourselves with flyers. A partner from Bosfields had the audacity to say this at the meeting. Affordability depends on the person, meaning that affordability is subjective. This is what the person said. That statement was an affront to Chinatown, just as Dragon Condos, which is an expensive condo which locals must walk by every day and not live in ever, is also an affront to Chinatown. And just as the former Bright Pearl building and Jewish Lyceum, which now sits devastatingly empty, is also an affront to Chinatown. So my call for affordable housing has already been reflected very well by previous speakers over several hours today, so I won't take up too much of that time. What I'll do now is call for solid bylaws that require developers to be contractually obligated to include affordable housing like Montreal's 2020 bylaw. Communities, but especially Chinatown, we do not have the capital to waste debating over affordable housing at a meeting where developers are really not listening, and so we need the city to ensure this for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Are there any questions? No? Thank you so much for being here tonight. And thank you to every single person that came tonight and took time. We've spent a good number of hours listening to all of your experience, those who work in the field, lots of great ideas. And now at this part of the meeting, we have an opportunity to ask staff any questions about the report that's here or move motions about how to move this forward. No, I just want to know if you have any questions for staff. Councillor Bradford, do you have any questions for staff?
I just want to quickly ask.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. I won't take up too much time. A couple questions about enforcement. Through the chair, one of the big challenges we heard about tonight was the enforcement of property standards and landlords letting buildings fall into a state of disrepair and then using maintenance as an excuse to issue the N13s. Are we going to be looking at how we can make sure the conditions for existing tenants are also getting better while coming up with strategies to avoid this well-worn tactic from landlords?
Councillor, in response to your question, through the chair, we have staff here tonight from City Legal, from City Planning, Shelter Housing and Support, and the Housing Secretariat. But we have taken notes with respect to everything that's been said. I think I have 26 recommendations that have come from the public, including the issue that you've raised, and as well the working group that is being formed of citizens will be supported by all of the departments that are here tonight, but as well MLS, Municipal Licensing and Standards, as well as our zoning people and our buildings department.
Okay, thank you. And one more follow-up on that with respect to the province. What do we know about the provincial's current level of enforcement? I think we heard a lot tonight, like no penalties, no fines. What do we know about the provincial level of enforcement on the RTA? How much are they doing from a proactive standpoint? And can we ask for part of that to be considered in the report that's coming?
Absolutely, we can ask about that. It has been raised in a number of the cases that have been reported in the media, but as well it's been raised tonight, and we'll be working with City Legal with respect to what enforcement mechanisms there currently are, how they are considered to be inadequate, and what recommendations we could be making to the province to improve enforcement as well as penalties associated with illegal evictions.
Okay, thanks. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Perks, do you have any questions? No, I just have legal here. Is legal? Legal. and I don't know if you can answer this, but we're going to refer all of these things to legal, but there's been a number of suggestions that when landlords are blatantly misleading in their N13s or any other type of document, that should be considered a fraudulent practice. Can you comment on that, or would you be able to look more into that if that gets referred to you or somebody in legal or somebody in outside legal?
So that, through the chair, so that has not been something we have been asked to look into before, but we certainly will look into that and report back as part of the kind of broader report back in terms of how the N12s and the N13s fit into the 318 or Section 380 of the Criminal Code.
And then we've also heard about those landlords that have rent-evicted people and then put their units or apartments on the market under Airbnb. Is there a requirement for a commercial license for your Airbnb or to be listed in some way, a business license of some kind that you know of? The new bylaw requires a commercial license, or you need to be licensed in some way in order to run that. Are you aware of that, or is that not something you're too familiar with? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I would have to look into that more and get back to you.
Okay. Is any staff here familiar with the Airbnb regulations? Yes, so, hi. So just asking that same question, that are there new requirements for registration, licensing?
There will be a requirement for registration, is my understanding.
A requirement for registration. And without registration, has Airbnb agreed that unless you're registered, you can't be on their website, or you can't be? So is there any way then to look at who has illegally rent-evicted people and not give them a registration because they fraudulently taken that unit off the market for an Airbnb unit?
We could.
Do you want to comment, or would you like to think about that later? But that,
I think we'd like to think about that. It's not in the current regulations that have been approved, but we could certainly look at that and report back.
it's not approved, but we are approving. I just want to be clear what the city's, what an operator of an Airbnb unit is going to have to do in order to be able to mount their unit on the Airbnb website is what?
So they'll have to register with the city, and we'll give them a number, and then they'll be required to post that as part of their listing on Airbnb.
And is the city able to not register them and not give them a number if for any reason they've been found to have taken that unit illegally off the market?
I don't believe that it's currently in the criteria for registration. So again, we'd have to look at how we could incorporate that.
And if we ask you to do that, can you do that in an expedited way to look at that so we're not waiting too long? And
We're looking at, now that the decision has been issued, we're looking at defining our implementation plans, and so we could incorporate that into our implementation plans.
You did hear one of their deputants make that recommendation tonight.
Yeah,
So
I made note of
those
that.
will all be referred to you, and
Yep.
that one, I hope, would be turned around very quickly.
Okay.
That would be the request.
Thanks for that.
Did you wish to make a comment, Mr. Gadden? You look like you did.
Well, Councillor, not with respect to that matter, but there is one of the recommendations in the creation of a working group, an advisory committee, and we'll be reaching out to the organizations that we have the names of and any of the deputants that have made themselves available to us to provide information about the creation of that group and provide the public an opportunity to apply to be a member of that the working group.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's a recommendation here, so I'm sure we'll be proceeding with that. Okay? Yep. Now we'll move on to speakers. Councillor Perks.
So, first of all, I want to thank everyone who came here tonight and told us their story. I always am amazed at people who are prepared to come and share something as personal as the circumstances of their housing. It requires remarkable courage. But because you've been so brave, you've also managed to be in this room where we've created remarkable power. I've been on council a while, and before that, I spent a number of years as a community activist. And every once in a while here at City Hall, something happens. There's a meeting like this where you get the sense that something big is about to change. I can remember the first time a group of people came down to City Hall and said, we need to ban pesticides in the City of Toronto. And a lot of people said, oh, that's federal and provincial jurisdiction, can't be done. But people like you, people who really wanted to see this change, insisted that the city figure out a way to do it, and we did. We got it banned here, and then other municipalities banned them, and then it became a province-wide ban. I feel a moment like that in this room tonight. The absolute commitment you've all shown to fixing a completely broken housing system. Frankly, our housing system right now, it only benefits vampires who are just drawing blood, life's blood out of this city and out of you. And the number of really thoughtful ideas I heard about, ways we can be creative, ways we can be smart, ways we can just plant our feet and get in their way until we're in a place finally where the most important thing in your life, your home, is something you can count on. And you get to count on that whether you were born in a rich family or you weren't. You get to count on that whether you get paid a fancy salary or you don't. It's just a right you have by virtue of being a Torontonian. And I think you can't say no to an evening like tonight. So for all of you who've been struggling with this for years and years, and I see some people that I've been working with on and off for decades, I think tonight something broke open, something broke loose. And I want to thank all of you for being here and helping us do that. I'm excited about where we're going to get. Thank you for being here.
Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much. There's a lot that I have to say about this, but I think actually what's more important was what you had to say about it. I can echo Councillor Perks's remarks in that respect. It means a lot to us that you took the time out of your evenings and your lives to come and share those deeply personal experiences with us on the subcommittee here, with the staff that are in the room who are going to be working very hard on these initiatives coming forward, and with the City of Toronto on the live stream. So we've heard those stories, and I've personally heard from many residents. Actually, one of our deputants tonight, Ivan, I'm not sure if he's still in the room, but thank you for coming down. We had a fight with the same landlord, Omega, who was trying to evict tenants, 6 units at 1 Kingswood. We had to get involved in that, and there are times when you can put up a fight and we can get a win and we can take action, but far too often, the persistence of these landlords, the odds are stacked in their favor, and the system is stacked and designed in a way that doesn't lead to positive outcomes for tenants, for residents of this city. And I feel that pain, and I do appreciate you sharing those stories with us. It's one of the countless examples that we see, all of us as councillors, that we see every month. So, this audience here, I know that you don't need to hear how desperate the situation is. We know it's desperate. But I think what we have is an opportunity for us to step back as a council, as a series of divisional partners here, and rethink our process, rethink our systems, and rethink our priorities. We're going to see a new housing plan coming forward imminently, very shortly. And what you're going to hear about is a human rights approach to housing, because it is a human rights issue. And we're going to have a human rights lens to housing. And that's going to change the dynamic, and that's going to change the approach. So my message actually here tonight is really for staff. And I think we can see their commitment to the issues by the way that they listened tonight, by the way that they responded to our questions, and for being here and engaging with all of us tonight. But I want to encourage them to think creatively. I want them to think about the opportunities to directly impact the lives of residents in this city. So we need to do the work up front. And, last count, I think it was 23 recommendations that have come forward from folks here tonight, 23 unique recommendations. And that's the work that we need to do up front to better manage the enforcement piece, to be proactive in helping tenants understand their rights. And we're going to take a big step in reducing some of the massive downstream impacts of the housing instability in this city. So we know these impacts. We all have a responsibility to work together to address them. I think with respect to our committee here, Planning and Housing, and the subcommittee that we have on affordable rental housing production, it's been very productive this term. We've done a lot of good work on the housing file, but we know there is a lot more work to do. And I'd like to close just by thanking you for your support, your time, your energy, and your ideas to helping us get this right. So thank you very much.
I'm going to move some motions tonight. I'm going to move the original recommendations, but I'm amending a few of them to include and any other threats to current affordable rental stock, because we've heard about that tonight. And then there is adding 1E, which has to do with potential mechanisms for investigating false rent evictions, landlords' own use rent evictions, and other similar fraudulent activities conducted by landlords, and the feasibility of requesting the Police Services Board to investigate. So that would come back. And then under 4A to, pardon me? Providing. Sorry, where does that for? Providing. 4A is providing. It's a, here, where? We're having changes right here. That's fine. Including but not limited to posting information on tenants' rights and resources available to protect those rights on apartment building notice boards, proving it to the constituency office staff of all Toronto City Councillors, member of provincial parliament, and members of parliament in the first quarter of 2020. So that's part of getting the message out. And then 5C to be amended, hosting the affordable rental workshop in the first quarter of 2020. And then to address the issue of tenant displacement and evictions, including solutions and the role of the advisory group going forward. Number 6 is a new recommendation. The public presentations and submissions provided on item RH 2.1 be referred to the Executive Director, Housing Secretariat, and the General Manager, Shelter Support and Housing Administration for further consideration. So that's all the recommendations that people made tonight. I think Mr. Gadden mentioned 26. But all of that is now being taken by the clerks and will be referred over and will be coming back at the report for the next meeting. I also have a motion B, which is something that Councillor Matlow forwarded, and it really has something to do with the number of people talked about tonight, and that's the protection of tenants in rental buildings with less than 6 units, because currently they're not protected. So those need to be looked at, and this is the motion here. This is that motion. So those are just an amended set of motions from what the recommendations are from staff. I'd just like to thank my colleagues who are on this committee with me and just say they're great, they're committed, and this is a very good committee, and thank our staff for being here from 7 o'clock till almost 10:30, because they're also very committed to housing and the housing continuum. But again, I just want to thank all of you, all of those who started at 7, all of you who made it all the way through to 10:30. Thank you for hanging in with us here tonight. And you are the brave people on the front lines of a really difficult issue in the city of Toronto right now. Very challenging, very big housing crisis. And this is one thing where we can't build housing as fast as landlords can drive people out of apartments, and we have to find a way to stop that. And I agree with you, Councillor Perks, that I feel like this is the start of something big, and it needs to be. So we are not the Rental Landlord and Tenant Board, or we don't administer the Rental Tenancy Act or anything in that way. And landlords have a lot of resources, they have a lot of power. It's provincial. We should say, well, why would you weigh in? Because being together is our power. We know that. ACORN knows that, all of you ACORN members here. And we have to bring the city to the table. That's our power too, and bringing the city here. So I think when Councillor Bradford says rethink how we're approaching things, I think that's really what we're starting here tonight. And we have a housing plan for 2020. And it's not just about building new housing, it's about protecting the affordable rental housing that we have in the city of Toronto, which everybody calls home in this room tonight. Thank you very much for being here. So I'm going to call the vote on the amended version of motion A, which is 1 to 5, and new 6. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And on motion B, which is Councillor Matlow's motion, and that is to add in the smaller buildings. And that's it.
The item is amended.
And the item is amended. All in favor? Carried. That's it. And thank you very much to the clerks for being here in the evening. This was for you, so you could be here, because normally we don't meet at night. So I hope that we'll continue to meet in the evening and that meets your needs. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Boy, you're